It's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting of Orangeville Town Council for Monday, October the 4th, open. And I'd like to first read our notice. Due to efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, the council chambers at Town Hall will not be open to the public to attend council meetings until further notice. Members of the public who have an interest in a matter listed on the agenda may, up until 10 a.m. on the day of the scheduled council meeting, email councilagenda@orangeville.ca indicating your request to speak to a matter listed on the agenda. Phone number and conference ID will be provided to you so that you may join the virtual meeting and provide your comments to council. Members of the public wishing to raise a question during the council or public meeting may, beginning at 7 p.m. on the evening of the council public meeting, call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 529-422-410 #. Callers will be invited to provide their questions or comments following the conclusion of the meeting presentations. Correspondence or emails submitted will be considered as public information and entered into the public record. If you require access to information in an alternate format, please contact the Clerk's Division by phone at 519-941-0440, extension 2256, or via email at clerksdepartment@orangeville.ca. May I have a motion to approve the agenda tonight, please? Councillor Peters, second by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Mr. Bonato, could we have the singing of our national anthem, please?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe there's any sound coming out. Is that correct?
We do not hear sound. That's correct.
Okay. I think this happened last time I tried to run it from home, and it's the same glitch that happened last time with the national anthem. So unfortunately, I won't be able to play it tonight.
All right, councillors.
We're ready.
Are you all set? I remember last time Councillor Taylor suggested I slow it down a little bit. We'll try and do that. All right. Oh, Canada, our home and native, patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. All right, I'd like to read our land acknowledgement as well. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa of the Three Fires Confederacy. This meeting is being aired on public television and are streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. To start, we have item 7, our presentations and delegations. Up first is Mr. Randy Narayan and Thomas DiCarlo of Choices Youth Shelter. Gentlemen, welcome. And I'm wondering if you could please provide your presentation to council and the public. Mr. Narayan.
Hi. Sorry about that. Just so you have the presentation that we were sent already. Now, in terms of screen sharing, I'll be honest, I'm not very good with this. Just trying to set this up here right now.
Okay.
this here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is an executive summary of the business case for the men's shelter. Did you want me to read through everything? Or did you want
I don't think so. Maybe
yourself?
just if you give us the high points, Randy, and tell us where you're at right now with
Okay.
men's shelter.
So right now with the men's homeless shelter, we have until October 15th until we have to vacate the properties. We are looking for another location, but without funding, we cannot sign a lease for another location. Basically, the synopsis of the summary is we're looking to create a shelter that's going to house possibly up to 8 individuals. And again, it depends on the size of the location that we're able to obtain. And the root cause of homelessness to us and basically the professionals that we hire to take care of them is mental health. What we're looking to do is deal with the mental health aspect of these men and then transition them back into society. So it's not just a regular shelter where we're going to take someone in, house them for the evening, and then let them back on the streets. It's we're going to bring them in, we're going to assess what their needs are, we're going to address the issues that are preventing them from whatever their obstacle is, finding a home, finding a job, kicking an addiction, assist them with that, and then help transition them back into society. If they don't, some of the men that actually come through the shelter actually do have jobs, they're just homeless and they don't have a place to live. Some of the men that have come through have had an addiction that we've had to help them out with. Now, if we can't help them because some of the issues are outside of our scope, we will find them the resource to get them the professional to help them out with that. Right now, all we're looking for is a subsidy to help us get through the next little bit, which is 166,546, so $166,546 right now. That's only half the amount that what we need for the year. And I do agree. I like your proposal there, Mayor, with just giving it to us on a monthly basis because we are pursuing other options to get the funding. Unfortunately, it will take a little bit of time. There are cycles and pay periods for those fundings to kick in if we were successful with it. And this would allow us that buffer zone to get, to that point. So we have no issues with that. In terms of how many men we've served since the brief period we've opened, it's 6 men in total that we've serviced through the men's shelter. So far, everything has gone great. We haven't had any issues with the men. The goal of the the men's shelter, there's 2 tiers to it that I'd like to address. So the first tier is just a basic men's shelter. That's what we're trying to get up and running right now is, as I explained, bring them in, assess what their needs are, find the proper resources, and address them through those resources or get them to where they need to be to get the help that they need. Now, the second part to the shelter, and this is our long-term goal, is various different programs at the shelter. So there are some spaces that are being used in Dufferin County, and I just learned of this recently for some programs. What I'd like the men's shelter to turn into is a place for men who are even teetering on the brink of homelessness. And with any problem, if you can get ahead of it, it will save you a lot of headache in the long term than if you're chasing after the problem once it's happened. And what we'd like to see is various different programs be put in place and men who have identified their issues can actually attend the shelter and get the help they need ahead of time. And this could be from anger management, employment services, drug and alcohol addiction, just one-on-one therapy and peer support groups. And I could dive into that, and that would take a long time. But that's just the basic synopsis of what we're looking to do there. One of the other things we're looking to do long term is create crisis beds. But again, that's a long-term project, and that will require a little more funding. Right now, all we're looking for is tier 1, which is a shelter that's going to help address the issues and get them to whatever their needs are. So the business case, I did send this out to council ahead of time. Did council have a chance to read the case that I sent out? And do you have any questions about it?
We all received it through our agenda notification. So Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Narayan? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Ryan. Who is leading your organization right now? Is it a board-run organization, or how are you going to implement these?
So right now, yes, the top tier of everything is the board itself. And then there's a shelter manager that runs everything right now. So we have an interim manager, his name's Ken, and he's the one leading the charge right now on a lot of the initiatives for the youth shelter. And he's been reshaping a lot of things with the men's shelter. But the board sets the agenda and Ken executes.
Follow up?
And he is a interim solution for now?
In terms of the shelter manager, yes, he is right now the interim manager there. The current shelter manager is off on leave. And
if I may, Your Worship, what is the situation in terms of employment? So even if you were to receive additional funding, it seems like we're in an employment crisis in Canada, certainly in Ontario and definitely in Orangeville. And you mentioned your employment concerns within your business plan. Do you think that funding from the county or ourselves is going to change that for you and you'd be able to implement this?
100%. The main issue right now is not finding people that will work. That is an issue. We're not able to give anybody a proper contract. And because I can't even tell them how long the shelter is going to be there for, I'm very transparent with everybody, especially so when Ken's interviewing everyone, we are very transparent when they ask, what is the duration of the shelter? How long is this for? And we tell them it's a temporary position. So what's happening is a lot of people are leaving, or they'll start and they'll leave for a more permanent position that comes up. And I can't fault them in that. That's our real struggle right now. And I understand we are in a crisis right now for employment. It's not finding the staff that's the issue. It's keeping them or getting them to sign a contract that's on a temporary basis. And the people who are out there looking for jobs want that sense of security, which we can all appreciate. It's hard to accept the job not knowing when it's going to end. So I tell everyone, yeah, we are looking for funding, but I can't guarantee anything. So what this will allow us to do is allow us to put contracts in place that then will give them the security and allow us to help retain staff.
Okay, councillors, any other questions, Mr. Narayan? Oh, Councillor Taylor, once again.
If I may, to me, my position on this very sensitive topic tonight is this is a county responsibility, this housing situation. And we as councillors certainly have a role in it. We can advocate with the county, we can work with the county, but the funding comes from the county. And I'm just curious what your take is on your relationship with the county, the communication you've had with the county. It feels like there's a disconnect here somehow, and I'm wondering what your take is on that.
So I do appreciate the question, and you're right. There is no disconnect. We are talking with them, but there are cycles for distribution of funds. And even if we were successful with it, it would have to fall into that period, and we'd need a way to get to the end of that cycle. Now, depending on which funding or which group it comes from, and again, that's a county thing in terms of where they can pull the money for this program. It could be sooner, it could be later, but we don't know. We are beginning the process with them. Initially, we did have a meeting set up with county and we did cancel it. I actually canceled it. And the reason we canceled it is we didn't feel that the business case that we created was appropriate enough to secure that funding. And I like to go in with my best foot forward. And we took the time to get this ready. And that's why when you had asked last meeting to have a business case ready, I said that's not a problem to have it ready by Friday, because we're already in the works for that for a little bit of time. So I have been in communication with county. We have been talking with them. I have not presented the business case. We do have a meeting set up for on Friday. But again, there is that gap between the time the lease is over to when that money could potentially kick in if we are successful with it. And that's all we're trying to fill in here. I did mention this to Mayor Brown, and that's when he said, you know what, let's see about this route, and hence we're here today.
Very good. Randy, I want to thank you for putting this together with Mr. DiCarlo. It's a lot of good information. We know that men are in crisis in our town. We hearing this from clergy, from the boots on the ground folks that are working with these people, and from some of our business owners. So I know this council is concerned about these issues and hope that we can work towards a resolution for this. So I'm going to move on now to our next presenter.
Mayor,
Sorry.
do you mind if I just add one more thing in there?
Okay, go ahead.
So I thought it was going to come up in the question, so I just kind of left it be for now. So we do understand that there are programs in place with the county for men's homelessness. I'm using air quotes here, but they're hotel programs, and the hotel programs, by my understanding of how they operate, because we talk to CAMH quite often, and it's motel vouchers for a night, technically one business day. And there is some sort of intake process, though they do have an intake process. The police can hand out these vouchers, CAMH can hand out the vouchers, but in terms of the supervision of the men while they're in there, it's not really anything. And in my eyes, based off what I've heard about the program, it's a Band-Aid solution. And I understand one councillor did bring up last meeting, Lisa Post, that what about this motel program, and she thinks it's fine. Unfortunately, you're not addressing the real issue, and you're just putting them into a revolving door. And it's like, okay, let's just kind of keep sticking them in there. But unless you're actually addressing the mental health aspect or whatever their issue is, or the root cause of the homelessness, you're not actually going to deal with it, and just going to become a bigger and bigger thing until it's like an epidemic here. Because right now, especially with COVID, a lot of people are losing their jobs, and that's why we're seeing a lot more homeless men on the streets. So I did want to address that. Like, yes, there is a program out there. Unfortunately, we feel that our program is actually going to help the men, and that's all we're looking for, is to help find their problem, resolve it, and get them back into, a better place.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Narayan. Moving on to our next presenter, we have Anna McGregor from County of Dufferin. Ms. McGregor has been working in this area for many years, and I hope that she's going to be able to share with us some of the programs and her current experience with men's homelessness in Orangeville and Dufferin County. So Ms. McGregor, thank you for joining us tonight and providing your insight.
Now, can you see that slide deck?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So thank you very much for the invitation tonight. I understand I have 5 minutes to share with you an overview about homelessness in Dufferin, and then it is for council to decide what they do with that information. So my role tonight is just to share with you what's really going on. So, homelessness in Dufferin. Not just Dufferin. This is a national problem. There was a large study done in 2013 where $7 billion a year in Canada is spent on trying to tackle homelessness. There is recognition that we are putting a lot of money into the system rather than getting more to the root cause. What would that mean on a daily basis? Just as an illustrative example, the average daily rate per diem for affordable housing in Canada is less than an emergency shelter or a hospital or a jail bed. Now, that's not to say that there is not a place for shelters and jails and psychiatric. However, it's to recognise that with limited funds, you want to put them where they're going to be needed most. That means nothing unless you have a Dufferin context. So in 2016, we did a homeless count and we had 78 people identified as homeless. In 2018, we did another count and we had 44 people identified as homeless. In April of this year, we did another count and we had 23 people identified as homeless. Now, our point in time count of 23 closely reflects the number of homeless individuals that we had reported on our March by name list. Now, our by name list is a real-time list of all the people experiencing homelessness in our community who want to be linked to services and work with service providers. That shows that the network that we have at the moment are doing a very good job of reaching out and connecting with the people that want service. But what does that mean? We often hear people talking about emergency hotel stays. That is only one tiny layer of the overall landscape. So for the 3-month period for July to September, we had 57 nights of emergency motel accommodation, but that was actually 40 different requests. We have a number of individuals who we would say use us on a repeat basis. So the idea that you would only ever come in and get one night and be left does not happen. Homelessness, for the point of these numbers, is anyone who doesn't have permanent residence, a permanent address. So the people who are in our emergency shelters are part of this count. So this count is including the unsheltered and the emergency sheltered people. What reduced those numbers? As you saw from our details, Dufferin is doing a very good job of tackling, and there's so more that we need to do. So, slide 2 and 3, we gave you details about how in a Canadian context there's recognition that you need to put the money where it needs to be. So we started changing our focus a few years ago, and we started to raise awareness that it's not just about an emergency bed stay. We do something called diversion. Diversion is where, when that first point of contact, you have a very serious conversation with someone and you look at what things could you do to de-escalate or to help the person find housing in that moment before they hit the street. We have a housing first approach where we genuinely look at putting people straight from housing crisis into permanent housing with minimal conditions or barriers. And in simple terms, that means we don't expect you to sober up. We don't expect you to get clean. Those are barriers often. So we have actually given financial assistance to our emergency shelters, and they administer housing allowances so they can actually follow a genuine housing first approach. There's a heavy emphasis on not just bed stays, but supports. Mental health and addictions are really, really challenging for this population. We've had increases in funding. Both federal and provincial dollars have increased in recent years, and the County of Dufferin also put in municipal dollars to this and realigned some of their existing funding. We use a data-informed approach. We take our by name list and we use that information to record and track if we're still making a difference. And we have a lot of collaborations and partnerships. We have a coordinated access table that meets every week. There's a no wrong door approach, and we collaborate on the emergency motel system. The emergency motels are just that initial stopgap. After that stopgap, it's all the supports that we layer on top. Who's part of that process? CMHA, Choices, County of Dufferin, DAFT, FTP, OPP, Orangeville Food Bank, Salvation Army, SHIP, the Lighthouse, White Owl. Now that's the main people that are at the table. We also work with other agencies as and when we need to. But we must stress, no one agency and no one level of government can tackle this on their own. Continued collaboration is needed. We have challenges. We have vacancies. We have a coordinated access programme where people can get up to a 3-month stay. There's also supports attached to the programme. We have vacancies there. Our emergency motel programme has never been full. We have vacancies there. That means that we have services that are not the right service. This isn't about the client not being right. This is about our services not being right. Choice. We must recognise clients face multi-barriers and often choose not to accept services on offer. They often find it hard to adhere to safety requirements. For example, during COVID, don't have a party. Suitability. Shelters and motels will on occasion ban people due to, for example, property being damaged or there being behavioural issues, and we have to respect that. We deal with a challenging population. There is a service gap. We have a very small group of really hard to serve clients with multiple barriers whose needs are not being met through emergency and transitional supports for a variety of reasons. These are very complex cases. More health supports are required to support those individuals in order to get them to a place where they might accept service. Oops. COVID, I don't need to tell you that COVID knocked everything on its head. It really highlighted how congregate settings are not good for IPAC, which is your infection prevention and control. We also had both of our shelters having to reduce their occupancy in order to make sure that they could do distancing and public health requirements, and we are still in a pandemic. Human resources. We have seen really high staff turnover in this sector. It's not just our local shelters that have experienced staffing issues, it's the whole sector as a whole. Complexity. Our clients are presenting with more and more challenging needs. We need more health supports. Crisis beds. Dufferin does not have its own crisis beds. We, when we can, will access either Brampton or Mississauga beds if they're vacant. Consent. Clients have to give their consent to share information. So even when a service provider knows what's going on, if the client doesn't want to share, they may not be able to share with anybody else. Funding constraints. Even though we've had increases in funding, it comes with strings, and we've got some quite tight parameters that we must work within. And there's a lack of affordable housing, whether that be new builds, conversions, or money for housing allowance. Affordability. 1 in 10 or 6,000 people in Dufferin live in poverty. 1 in 9 households actually live in core housing need. You'll see I've highlighted on that slide, Town of Orangeville yourselves forwarded to us 94 postcards, which were part of an affordable housing campaign that a number of the agencies on the previous slide circulated to raise awareness at the lower tier level of affordable housing as a challenge. For municipalities, it's not just about funding. This is a checklist that you can get from CMHD, which provides other options as well as so that municipality can look at addressing affordable housing. CMHD have got resources, and so do the provincial government. For more information specific to Dufferin, there's the 10-year housing plan, there is the annual update, there's also DCEC, which is Dufferin County Equity Collaborative, which has a pillar looking at housing and homelessness, and there's also the Community and Safety and Wellbeing Plan for Dufferin, and they too have raised housing as an issue. So all in all, that's a quick 5 minutes, and it's up to you what you do with this information. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Andrews. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Ms. McGregor, thank you very much for being here this evening. I know that your particular team has done a lot for our region, continues to do a lot, and as has been quoted by one of your staff most recently, as much as a lot is being done, there are still some gaps, and we understand based on your presentation that you have been able to provide those of us around the table a lot of information. I got a couple of questions of which of your presentation helps tremendously, but can you describe, maybe for those that aren't familiar, how you communicate to those that may be new to the community, that may not necessarily be aware of what's going on? You know, just as an example, anecdotally, we hear of individuals who are coming up here. And for someone that is new to the area, that is struggling from one of those points that you've addressed, how can they end up receiving help? And then I also have a follow-up question as well, Your Worship.
So, through you, Mayor Brown, so generally what happens is when people are coming from different regions, there's a local point of contact through social services, or in Dufferin's case, we call it community services, where you would contact your local social service office, and then they would give you the relative pieces of information. Those agencies that you saw on the list on one of the previous slides All of those agencies, if you contact any one of those agencies, they all have the same information. We have a genuine no wrong door approach in Dufferin, where if you go to any of them, they will share that information with them.
Okay, I know that, again, there's some examples that some of us have been privileged to where some people just, again, they don't know where to go. And I guess sometimes there are those cards that were presented as an option. And I guess through word of mouth within the circle of those that find themselves in the plight that they're in, hopefully they will end up getting in touch with the right people. The other question I have for you is based on the information that Mr. Nareen had presented, and I'm hoping that you might have been privileged to some of that prior to your presentation. And I know that there is some discussion that is forthcoming potentially this Friday from what was shared. How does this end up supporting the gap that we're talking about here this evening?
So full disclosure, I had a conversation with Randy today. He requested a meeting with the county on Friday. We've set up a meeting on Friday, and until we have a sit down and go through those details, I genuinely would not be in a position to answer that. But I would hope that this presentation would show there's no one thing. There are lots and lots of different layers and lots of agencies involved. So I don't think that this discussion in any way is not of use. I think what this highlights is everyone can see there is an issue with homelessness. The challenge is, where do you put your resources?
Very good.
Thank you for that response.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, any other questions for Ms. McGregor? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to make sure I'm off mute. Through you to Ms. McGregor. A couple of things. One is, I didn't receive that PowerPoint that you shared. I don't think it came as part of our council package. Would you be able to share that with us? There's some links in there that I'd love to make sure that I'm fully informed upon, and I just would appreciate the time to read through it and spend some time on what you just said.
Definitely. I have actually already forwarded that to the clerk's office, and I was holding off pending further information that I would have added to it, but didn't get any more details in time. So yes, and I'd love you all to look at some of that information. Okay,
I'd be appreciative of that. One of the things that I'm frustrated about, and we've had conversations over the years, we being myself with yourself and your department, and where I just don't understand is the consent piece. I understand people's privacy and a right to privacy, but as an elected official in the town, it's frustrating to me that I can't get information from your department on key issues. And, it would be, I guess, specific issues so that I can understand them. I assume you're going to tell me that it's against the law and whatnot to be able to share, but just as someone who's trying to help with things, and I think you've got 6 other people staring at you from a council that are trying to help too, it would help immensely with my understanding if I had more details than what the housing department at the county is able to share. So I'd love to be able to see a more overt relationship if it were all possible. And I have one other one, and I'll just wait for your comment on that if we could, Ms. McGregor. Thank you.
Okay, so consent is very tricky. We deal with a very vulnerable group of people who sometimes will provide consent for the people around the coordinated access table and nobody else. And then sometimes they will take that consent away. We have to guard that information. There's all sorts of different privacy pieces that we have to adhere to. So yes, we are following legislative requirements. But in addition to that, we can share information if it doesn't identify people. So the challenge that you have, because we are talking about a really hard to serve vulnerable group that's very small, it becomes very hard to discuss a small group of people without identifying them. But we can share by name list data, and we can strip it of identifying information and give you statistics. So that we can do, but anything that would identify people, we can't. Does that help?
It does. Transparently, again, sorry, Your Worship, through you, if I may. It looks like sometimes that things are being hidden or we don't get the full story. And I'm certainly not accusing you or your department of nefarious activity. I have great respect for you and your team. I just want to share that frustration with you. And I don't think we're going to solve it for tonight, but part of any problem is having all of the information. And sometimes I feel like we don't have all of the information.
Through you, Mayor Brown, you raise an incredibly pertinent point, Councillor Taylor, because that is a challenge that our service providers have. And that's one of the reasons that we have the coordinated access table, so that that table can share information. We could have somebody called John Smith who goes to Choices and tells Choices, this is my circumstance and this is what I need. That same person might then go to CMHA, this is my circumstances and this is what I need. And you can't effectively help when you don't know what the right hand and the left hand are doing. People have got various coping mechanisms and various ways of dealing with their circumstances. So in order to get to the root of the problem and to find out what's going, there's a lot of digging and uncovering that needs to be done. And there's an awful lot of privacy in all of those layers. But that is a challenge that as service providers we have.
Okay, Your Worship, if I may.
One more, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, sir. In terms of funding, you know, again, this isn't an area that our council necessarily dives in deep, and you know, I'm certainly interested in learning. But there would be a general feel, and I think I'd be aligned to this, that this is a county responsibility, and if there is an issue, and you say there is not, other people say there is, it's difficult to get a grasp on it. But let's just say we determined that there was an issue. What avenues financially would you have available to you from a county perspective? And if the answer is none, then that's fine too. I guess what I'm asking specifically is the well dry, or is there money there that could be used in 2021 or even the first half of 2022 towards addressing Orangeville's issues?
So again, through you, Mayor, so the County of Dufferin, we do recognise that there is still a problem with homelessness. I don't want anyone to believe that our position is that there is not an issue. We have made great strides in tackling it, but more needs to be done. Is the well dry? The well isn't technically dry. However, without understanding what the ask would be, there's no way we could answer that question, because there are parameters with the provincial and the federal funding. So depending on what the ask is, what's the mandate of the shelter? What are the actual services that they're going to provide? How are they going to record and track that? Does it fall in line with existing contracts? Without knowing all of those details and more, there's no way at this point I could say that community services would or would not be able to offer funding.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McGregor, I just wanted to make a comment. Would it be fair to say that we've got a housing crisis going on in Canada, particularly in Ontario and Southern Ontario? And later on in our meeting, we're going to be looking at some suggestions in our official plan to help address this, including infill housing and secondary suites and things like that. Where do you place the housing crisis in the list of reasons for homelessness going on right now, and how can municipalities help to change that?
So there's actually a national push as well as a provincial push for more affordable housing. We recognise that there is a housing crisis, and it's been 40 years in the making. Social housing, or community housing as it's now called, has been chronically underfunded, and we are the funding of last resort. You saw details there in one of the slides about our wait list. It's anything between 4 to 8 years. Housing has become more unaffordable for everybody, not just no earners or low earners or no earners. So yes, without a doubt, there's affordable housing crisis. How that relates to homelessness? When you look at a housing first approach, if we can take away a lot of money from all those very expensive band-aids and put it into affordable housing, we actually save money and do more good. But it's a challenge to do it because there's limited resources on all fronts.
Right. We had former councillor Bradley appear before our Men's Homelessness Committee about a month ago. She shared some of her personal experiences, but one of the things that stuck in my head was a stat that she put out, which was it costs somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 a year to society for homeless people. And you shared that on one of your slides, the cost of emergency services, of acute bed care, of mental health crisis, and all of these things. And when you talk about who's helping the homeless, it's pretty high priced help all the way around. And so, you know, what I think society has to understand is that getting proper housing at whatever cost is actually going to be less expensive than trying to deal with the crisis that we're in and some of the homeless people that we're dealing with, who have been forced into these situations, sometimes through economic problems rather than mental health as well. So just want to make that point. We all need to work on this, both provincial, county, I guess federal. I think even our municipality should be looking at ways that we can continue to push to create more inventory, more housing. I see Warden White is on board. Warden White, welcome. I know you're not on the agenda, but I know you have participated in many of these meetings. And I just wondered if you'd like to take a couple minutes to share your thoughts.
Sure. Well, thank you, Your Worship, and council, staff, and members of the public that are joining us. I'm a tag along with Anna, but I brought the subject matter expert for everybody to listen to. Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree with most of what has been said here tonight. We do have a housing issue, a housing problem. It's a housing attainability issue in many aspects. And part of the reason we have some of these backups at the bottom end is because there are log jams at different spots throughout the housing matrix, let's call it. You know, if we can't find a way to get somebody who's in the rent geared to income program into a market rent apartment, for instance, that takes away a bed at the bottom of that spectrum. So, you know, and one of the things I do want to talk to mention briefly is, you know, with all due respect, and I've heard it a couple of times tonight, and I've heard it on social media, I've heard it from a number of different places. This isn't only a county issue. I mean, you know, the funding as a service manager, that's what the county community services does, and quite frankly, I think Anna and her team do it very well, notwithstanding certainly the challenges around, you know, identity and, you know, privacy and whatnot. But, you know, if you break it down into its simplest form of funding, then yes, it's a county responsibility, but it's every level of government and every resident's, quite frankly, responsibility to try to deal with homelessness and housing attainability or lack of housing attainability. And the way we do that is through some of the other things that have been mentioned, like infill policies, better official plan policies that allow for legal, conforming, fire rated basement apartments and things like that to be made available. And all of that would help the system move through its natural phase. I met just last week with some folks that are in our emergency transitional housing program. And, you know, I get the challenges and I understand it. And part of that is because, you know, it is very stigmatizing to be inside that system. It very much is. And it's very challenging for those folks to sometimes answer very personal questions about why or how or why they got there. But the only way to fix it is for us to allocate funding in a more appropriate, better way to manage the problem. I mean, Anna's right. Band-Aids here and there, they cost a ton of money and they don't often give really good, solid results. So we need to all, you know, all work together and not work in silos per se to get it. That being said, the final comment I'll make is one that Anna already made. The funding is not, you know, people that think they will be paying twice, it's not the case. You know, while there are some property tax dollars at the county level that go into it, the vast majority of the funding for Ontario Works and things like that come from transfers from upper levels of government. They come from not-for-profits. They come from, quite frankly, anywhere Anna can root it out from. And then we are a service manager and provide that funding through different programs, SHIP, Choices, all of those different service providers. So it's really good for people to know the exact mix and the exact organizational chart, I guess, for lack of a better term, of where those dollars come from, that so that they understand how much their tax dollars are being affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden White. Society's been working towards gender equality, but I have to make a statement. There is still some gender disparity, and I would say men are less likely to admit a problem than women are, less likely to ask for help. And I think there are those men that are out there couch surfing, living in the forest, that are out of sight, out of the county's count. And I think it's I hope that what we can drive towards here is maybe a men's resource hub where men who find themselves in a problem can go and ask for help, ask for guidance without being stigmatized. And that's really, I think, what we need here. A bigger picture. A lot of men are too proud to admit that there's a problem going on, and I think that is a problem with our gender. I think we tend to do that, and I don't know if any of you men that are listening in think the same way I do, but I think that is the case. So I hope we can somehow pull this together collectively and collaboratively to work on this problem and make sure that nobody's left, that there's no gap there, that everybody is offered the assistance that they need. So that's all I wanted to say. Any other questions of Ms. McGregor or anybody? Yes, Councillor Taylor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Warden White. Warden White, it's my pleasure to see you tonight. Thank you so much for joining our meeting. I'm curious. Things are moving quickly, and I know the mayor has sent a revised motion for tonight, and I'm not sure if you've seen that, but it would essentially put things back to the county the way I've quickly read it. And I guess my question to you, sir, would be would you advocate with the mayor to make homelessness and housing a priority at the county, or does it not make your list of priority items? Or what's your thoughts on that, and what kind of support or not support would we receive from yourself and your leadership on this issue at the county?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Brown, to Councillor Taylor. The pleasure's all mine to be here tonight. I mean, it's an honor just to be nominated, as they say, right? To answer your question, I mean, I think if Anna can nod or not if she wants, it's totally up to her. But I think if you ask Anna what my position has been over the years, it's been that housing and homelessness, mental health supports, anything to do with community services has been at the top of my list for the decade that I've been on county council. I have made no secret over the years of challenges that I've had often. I mean, about 15 years ago, I was in a position where I was seriously injured at work. I had no coverage. The coverage I should have had through WSIB decided to fight it. And at one point, in order to feed my 3 children, we were using the Orangeville Food Bank, and we were using the Shelburne Food Bank because we had no options. We almost were homeless. And to Sander, to Mayor Brown's point, that's not. He's right. That's not something most men will share. I have chosen to make that public over the years because I believe it can help, and it can show people that being at the bottom is not the end of the road for you. There's always a way back up the stairs. And but the short answer to your question is yes, it is a priority. It's a priority with me. I believe it's a priority with the vast majority of county council now. Anna's department is one of our most important. We are very appreciative of the good work she does. And we believe that it is something that we need to focus on, and I think we do. And if we don't, Anna has got no bones about telling us we're making a mistake.
Thank you, Warden. I know we've had a number of discussions about this over the past few months, but a lot of people are one job loss or one serious injury away from very desperate financial times. And So for those who are in those, thank you for your statement, Warden White, and thank you for your perseverance and able to bounce back from those issues that you've had. But many of us have had low points in our lives, and just want to make that known that there is a way out, and certainly Dufferin County is helping people with those problems. So thank you, Anna. Thank you, Warden White. If there's no further questions, councillors, we've got a big agenda. I'd like to move on to Mr. Carter and Mr. Scott on this same topic, and then perhaps talk about the motion or perhaps an amendment to the motion. So, Mr. Carter, welcome. I'd like to ask you to share your experiences over the past 10 years or so caring for and worrying about homeless people in our town.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council, and thank you to Warden White for sharing his comments and for being so open. And I want to say I agree with the warden's comment about this issue is not just a matter of county council or town of Orangeville or any level of government. It's a responsibility that we have as citizens of this community. And that's really what I want to speak to. I'm not here on behalf of the Men's Homelessness Committee, although I'm a member of that. I'm not here on behalf of any organization. I'm just a person that has an office on Broadway, and I'm concerned about homelessness involving men. My first experience was 10 years ago, finding a young man behind my office, and I was shocked, I was appalled, got him accommodation, and then contacted the county of Dufferin and worked with Keith Palmer, who was the head of the housing, and we formed a committee, being the Homelessness Shelter Task Force in 2012, and also set up the voucher program that currently is in place, and arranged for the County of Dufferin to have a safety fund for charitable donations to be made, and participated in that. The work of that committee came to an end in 2013-14 because we thought we had an answer of finding an organization to run a program, and that being the John Howard Society, but they had to pull out. And after that, we were left just with the safety program for those that wanted to help fund it for the voucher program. Fast forward to August of last year, found another man behind my office. Again, I was appalled that this would happen. He couldn't get accommodation. He had asked for a voucher, was not able to get a voucher at that point for various reasons. I went around to try to get him into the Atlanta Motel, couldn't get into Knights Inn, put him up at the Best Western, and then contacted the mayor at that point and contacted the county to say, we've got to talk about the problem with men's homelessness. Organized over the fall, having ad hoc meetings of various officials involving those from the County of Dufferin and the mayor and others to talk about it. And what I was told was that there was a voucher system and it was adequate. And I said, I don't think so. I don't think it's working. We've got some gaps, but at least we have to get the word out. And as a result of that, there was steps taken to get a card to hand out with the telephone numbers for it, but there's nothing listed there directly for men because there's not a men's shelter. I asked that there be posters put up in the community and put an ad in the paper, and there was not support from the county to put an ad in the paper. I said that I would pay for it myself, but instead I contacted Sandy, the mayor, and the mayor arranged for that ad to be put into the Town of Orangeville news section of the paper. Fast forward over the last year, I've encountered 5 different men myself who are homeless in 9 different incidents, with 4 incidents of men either sleeping behind my building or at the front door of my building. Homelessness is a reality. In addition to the gentleman last August, I dealt with a man that was looking for shelter back in October of last year. Some of the council members may have mentioned, may recall, we were doing emails during a council meeting trying to find out where we could get accommodation for him. In February, we had a man come to our office, and our receptionist handed him a card of where to go, and he threw it down. He said, "There's nothing there for men. There's nothing there for men. It's useless." In April, as I drove into the office, I saw a man who had been sitting repeatedly over the last couple of mornings out at the corner of Broadway and First, and I went up to him and I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I'm not okay. I'm looking for shelter. There's not a men's shelter in Orangeville. Can you get me some bus money to go down to some place that has a men's shelter?" I helped him. Anyone would do that. In addition to that, I dealt with a gentleman who some of you have seen around town and tried to work with him to come up with some suggestions of how to deal with the problems that he has. These men are dealing with problems in their lives, mental illness, addictions. We need to have more than a simple voucher system. We need to have answers, and part of that is to have an emergency shelter in place. The town of Orangeville, with the council's support, has got a men's committee in place, and we're looking at different ideas in that regard. We need to work towards having a facility in place that will do that. The County of Dufferin needs to do more. No one's criticizing what they are doing, but they need to do more. And I don't find that that has been the case. So hopefully the focus can be upon meeting the needs that are there instead of justifying what's being done. We can do better in our community. We can stand together and work together as a team for it. And I just compliment the town of Orangeville Council. You're taking the lead. You're looking at this issue. You're talking about it. You're bringing it to the attention of the public. And I really commend all of you for what you're doing in that regard. So what I would say is this needs to be looked at seriously. The County of Dufferin needs to look at funding. You need to look seriously at the options that are available. We need a men's shelter in place, and it shouldn't simply be dismissed because it doesn't fit necessarily within a particular box. So, Mr. Mayor, those are my comments, and hopefully there is some help in the discussion tonight.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Carter, for your continued advocacy for this issue. That advertising campaign that was put together, including those cards and some other information that was put out to the public, I think was quite helpful, and I hope it did help some individuals who needed that help. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for again adding your commentary on this problem, and we'll be meeting again Wednesday night. Our Men's Homelessness Committee again will be meeting on Wednesday night. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you. Councillors, any questions for Mr. Carter before we move on to Mr. Scott last on this? Mr. Taylor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Carter. You know, Mr. Carter, you and I have had many conversations about this as well. I certainly appreciate your advocacy and the amount of drive that you have to make our town better. I guess my confusion is I always try and be as simplistic as possible. And you were saying the county needs to do better, they need to do more. Could you, like in kind of 3 short bullet points, what are they? What's your elevator speech? What are those 3 things?
Well, number one, instead of sort of waiting for choices to come forward with their plan, we'll look to see what the town of Orangeville did. The mayor, Sandy, reached out to Choices to find out information, and Choices came to the men's committee twice to give information about it. So the county needs to be proactive instead of simply reactive. That's number one. Number two, the voucher system is not sufficient in itself. We need to get a shelter. It's not the complete answer, but it's part of the answer. We need to have transitioned housing for men. You know, let's do a comparison. Can you imagine saying to a woman in crisis, here's a voucher for a motel? That's not adequate. We wouldn't do that. We have family transition place. Thank goodness we do, going back to the 1980s. We have a situation with men. We need to be able to address it. We need some creative thinking from the county, and we're not getting it. Instead, we're just simply getting defensive response is that everything is fine the way it is, and it's not.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm gonna, again, thank you, Mr. Carter, for joining us tonight and sharing your thoughts. I'm going to move on now to our last speaker. It's our item 7.4, Brian Scott. Brian is with Choices. Mr. Scott, I believe, is the vice chair of Choices. Mr. Scott, are you on board, sir?
I am. Actually, I really don't have anything to add that Randy didn't already present. And I believe that what Mr. Carter just said, it just illustrates everything that we've been trying to say. So I have really nothing further to add.
All right, very good, sir. So, councillors, I'm going to bring up on my screen this revised motion here, if I may. Where are we here? Can I share my screen, Madam Clerk? Or not? And if not, could you put this revised motion up on the screen, please?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. You should be able to, but would you like me just to proceed?
Yeah, would you please do that? Thank you. And if I don't know if you can zoom in a bit on that. And if you can scroll down really to the last stanza, so essentially this motion remains intact other than the last couple of stanzas. And the change here was that, and this is after consultation with council members, the concern that social services are really a Dufferin County matter. The fact that Orangeville does provide significant funding to Dufferin County through our tax dollars, and that we want to ask Dufferin County to be more proactive, to work for a solution with the current agencies and others to try and provide, particularly over this winter, some additional funding and solutions for men's homelessness. So the last stanza reads, therefore be it resolved that the town of Orangeville request that Dufferin County provide additional funding support as required for homeless men for the fourth quarter of 2021 and the first quarter of 2022. Such support shall include emergency housing, transitional housing, counseling and diversion programs to assist with addiction treatment, mental health treatment, job or skills training, and other resources to assist single men and fathers with children in Orangeville and Dufferin County. And the Dufferin County continue to work with SHIP, Choices, the Town of Orangeville Men's Homelessness Committee, and other support agencies to find the best possible solutions to reduce men's homelessness in Orangeville and Dufferin County. What this does is push the conversation now over to Dufferin County, which a number of our council members have suggested that that's really where it should be. You know, we realize, and I'm speaking to our friends at Choices right now, that this is a delay in this funding, and that, however, what we're experiencing tonight is democracy in action. This is what we do. We debate issues, we come up with solutions, and sometimes, you know, we have to change the tack here, and this is what I'm suggesting we do tonight. And I think I'm hoping that that our council is supportive of this. I'm hoping unanimously, because we do know that the truth is lying somewhere in between. Everything's fine and we have a disaster on our hands. There is some good things happening, but there, as Mr. Carter has mentioned, there needs to be more done, and we're hoping that our ask of Dufferin County would be received appropriately, and that funding required to help all men that are in, and that, as Mr. Carter said, that there's some additional, you know, I guess, outreach to these people, and to try and find a better and more kind solution for their problems that they have. So councillors, if it's okay with you, I would like to suggest this amendment. I'm looking for a seconder, and then perhaps we can have some conversation on this. Could we have a seconder to amend this motion as we have it in front of us? Anybody? Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Taylor, you had your hand up. Did you wish to comment?
Yes, sir. I have a question for you, if I may, Your Worship.
Yeah.
Could you explain to myself and to the rest of the town of Orangeville how county council works, and specifically, how many votes does Orangeville have if we're to go through, and how many votes do we need, if I may? And then if I could have a follow-up question with you.
As I understand it, there's 32 votes on county council. The votes are apportioned by population. Orangeville, being the largest population center and municipality in Dufferin County, holds 14 of 32 votes. So Deputy Mayor McIntosh and I have spoken on this matter. We're more or less aligned on this, and we hope that we can garner the additional support needed to push some additional funding towards men's homelessness in the county, and importantly in the largest urban center within the county, Orangeville, where more of this problem seems to be happening than most other municipalities that are in Dufferin County. Councillor Sherwood and then Councillor Taylor. Go ahead, Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. So just for clarification of this motion, we are now putting the full request to the county for the full 333,000, but we're asking for immediate release of funds for 176,000, and then the balance will come after that first quarter of 2022, correct?
Well, I think the wording has been changed a little bit, Councillor, in that it's a little more nebulous than that. I think we're in the the fourth quarter of 2021 right now. So the ask is that there is some immediate action, meetings. Obviously, there's going to be a meeting on Friday, which is a good thing, between the Choices folks and the county. Anything that the town can do, I'd certainly be happy to be part of those discussions as well. But it's really, the next 6 months is critical. The snow's going to be flying, as much as the last few days has been quite pleasant. The snow's going to be flying in 4 to 6 weeks for sure, and we need to make sure that those who are vulnerable and on the street right now are looked after, and looked after well. So my ask is that the county look for some immediate assistance. Now, again, we have to go before county council, and really there's also a committee. Potential committee meeting that has to be this run through before it gets to the full body of county council. So go ahead, Councillor Sherwood.
So would you not be asking them for a specific amount of funds, you and our deputy as our representatives? Because when you're asking for the Dufferin County to provide additional funding, we're not saying like give them $1,000 or give them 333,000. I think we need to be kind of specific what we were hoping. Right. I read it as our original ask was for 166,000, but we're not actually asking the county for 166,000 here.
Correct, and what I'm trying to encourage here is a unanimous support of this motion, that this then go into some further discussions with the county, with Choices, to come up with another formal notice of motion at county council, which will have some, I think, further detail in there. So this motion is not to direct county council. It's that our council is asking and requesting that there be further support, yet to be determined exactly, for men's homelessness in our town and our county. So
this makes it a bit difficult for the Mr. Noreen and the Choices to not really know what's going to happen on the 15th.
I know, and it is difficult. It's difficult because we can't we can't tell the county to do anything at Orangeville Town Council, Councillor Sherwood, and there's a gap in time here. It's unfortunate, but like I said before, we're in a democracy. We're trying to work our way through this. It's difficult. There is no easy solution, and we have to give it the time that is required. And again, even if I put that number of 166 in there, we can't direct the county to do anything. We have to get the approval of county council to add some assistance as required. So it's really difficult. And I hope that Orangeville Town Council members are supportive and recognizing that we do have some additional work that we need to do in this area. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just want to say I appreciate the benevolence that you've exhibited as you try and solve this. I think it's well done on your part. I'm really glad to see the change in approach. I think it's correct. I think it's right. I'm not so worried about how you've worded the notice of motion. I think the general gist of this is that you would like to have a unified front here and go to the county council with a unified front, and I certainly appreciate that. I guess my hope would be is when you do get to county council, I heard Warden White, and I'm not sure how many votes Warden White gets. I'm not familiar with the intimate details of how this would go, but if the warden carries the weight that I believe he does, and I do the math correctly, you would be over the 50% just between yourself and the deputy mayor and the warden, and you would get this done. Yeah. But my concern is, as I listened to Ms. McGregor speak this evening, I don't know, like, how do you squeeze something that doesn't have anything to give? So if the county doesn't have the money allocated, and that's not a small ask, I guess we could have all the benevolency from Orangeville Council and some great things from 3 individuals on county council, and I'm sure you'd get some other very wonderful individuals over there to help support you in addition to the 3 that you have. But how would we get that money? So I guess it's over to you to sort that out, but I'll certainly be supportive of your initiative, and I wish you all the best with it. And I thank you for changing it, but I think you've still got a road to hoe here. Anyway, best on your journey, and we wish you well.
Yeah, I think one of the, I guess, silver linings that's happened through COVID is that the provincial government has recognized that there are some additional needs, and I believe the county has received some additional funding for affordable housing, and I hope that shelters fall under that umbrella. But again, we need to have some further discussions with Ms. McGregor and her team, and I hope that the folks who are trying to do what they can at Choices and SHIP are involved in the conversation, and that collaboratively we can come up with the right solution to ensure that nobody gets left behind here, and that sorry, phone was going off, and that we get the next steps. So, councillors, we have a motion here. Deputy Mayor seconded it. Any further comments before we vote on this? All in favor? Thank you, councillors, for your support. And again, looking forward to the continued conversation, hopefully later this week, and coming up with the next steps that are necessary to make sure that there are no gaps over the winter, particularly this coming winter. All right, moving on. We have some correspondence, 8.1 and 8.2. Both of these correspondence were regarding the men's homeless shelter issue. I know Ms. Bradley, I believe her letter did speak to this as being a county issue, so we have followed that, and I guess Ms. Heather Sheehan's letter was again in support of the need for additional work, and that our homeless situation is not perfect, that we need to continue to work on it, and I'm hoping we'll be able to do that coming up. Yes, Councillor Sherwood.
I'll put a motion to receive those 2 pieces of correspondence.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Post. All in favor? Very good. Okay, so we've dealt with 9.1. Moving on to the public meeting. So we have some interesting things to discuss tonight. One of the more important things that this council has worked on is the concern for traffic safety. There have been a number of motions put forward by various councillors over the past couple of years working towards what we call generally traffic calming, some specific locations in town. But really, we needed to look at a more holistic view, and there are a number of, I think, excellent suggestions in this report, sort of physical changes in the roadway that can control traffic. And I'm quite interested to hear what council has to say about this report. But I'd like to introduce Mr. John Lackey, who's manager of the Town of Orangeville's Transportation and Development. And Mr. Lackey, if you could speak to this matter, please.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council, and thank you for those remarks. I have just a few introductory comments myself, and as you've mentioned, speeding and traffic safety concerns have been expressed by numerous delegations and resident groups. As such, staff were directed by Council earlier this year to engage an engineering consultant to review traffic calming measures and to develop a town-wide traffic calming policy. Requests for proposals were advertised, and in June of this year, staff engaged the services of SEMA Canada to develop a traffic calming policy for the town. That policy is intended to assist staff in their assessment and implementation of traffic calming options. SEMA's presentation this evening will define traffic calming, provide information on what type of traffic calming measures are suitable for the town of Orangeville, and finally, what process the town, and in particular, what staff will need to follow for the appropriate review and implementation of traffic calming measures. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Jamie Garcia, Associate Partner and Senior Project Manager of SEMA's Transportation and Traffic Engineering Division, and he'll provide a presentation on traffic calming. Following the presentation, Mr. Garcia will be available to answer any of your questions, and subsequent to that, the study will be finalized as well as the policy, and we're anticipating that to be done in November of this year. So on that note, I would introduce Mr. Jamie Garcia to provide us with the traffic calming presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Garcia, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Madam Clerk, can I share my screen?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Perfect. If somebody just confirmed that the presentation is in your screens, I want to proceed.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. The presentation is short. The intention of this material is to provide you, as John said, with an introduction about what is traffic calming, what are the elements that we are considering as part of this policy preparation, as well as what is the type of traffic calming that we are envisioned to implement in the town of Orangeville. We are going to try to limit the presentation to around 15-20 minutes. In that way, we will have time for comments and questions. So, as I mentioned before, we have four main elements as part of this presentation. What is traffic calming? How traffic calming relates to the town's vision and goals, and how traffic calming is usually being implemented. We will continue in the second part with a brief introduction about what are the types of traffic calming measures that we found suitable for the town of Orangeville, and how these measures will be implemented as part of the generate policy and implementation process. At the end, we will have time for comments, questions, as well as provide opportunities for general public to provide us with feedback. So what is traffic calming? Well, traffic calming is not only the development of construction of traffic calming measures. The intent of traffic calming is to provide a set of alternatives and measures to reduce the speed and encourage safety driving behaviors that allows the public to drive based on the surrounding environments. When traffic calming is required? Well, traffic calming is required when some driver behaviors doesn't correspond with the type of roadway or the context of the surrounding areas. An example is, for example, school zones in which speeding is presented, although the posted speed indicates a lower speed for this type of roads. There is a specific limitation for traffic calming. Not all the measures and not all these observed behaviors can be addressed by traffic calming. There are specific elements, for example, that is speed management that doesn't relate technically with traffic calming, and we will need to take that in consideration as part of the implementation process. How traffic calming relates to the town's vision and goals. We need to say that the official plan goals and objectives doesn't technically describe a traffic calming per se. There is nothing in the official plan that speaks about traffic calming. However, the visions and objectives clearly indicate that it's the purpose of the transportation network to provide a safe and efficient movement of people and goods, as well as to reduce the dependence on the use of vehicular traffic. This is a very explicit description of traffic calming. For that reason, we truly believe that it cannot be denied that the implementation of traffic calming measures can support a safer environment within existing communities and new neighbors on the town of Orangeville. How traffic calming will be implemented? The implementation of traffic calming is proposed in two parts. One, the development of a traffic calming policy, and second, the implementation of an implementation process. These are two different elements, and these elements are being conducted and discussed with the town staff, as well, and this is very important, with other stakeholders. In this case, fire and emergency services, OPP, transit, that have a strong say about the type of measures that can be implemented in a town like the town of Orangeville. So, what are these type of traffic calming measures? As part of our engagement with town staff and stakeholders, we identified that not all the types of traffic calming measures can be applied to all types of roadways for several reasons: operational, public safety reasons, installation criteria, etc. The type of measures that we envision to implement in the town as part of the policy are or can be categorized as horizontal deflections, roadway narrowing, surface treatments, and others that can reduce some types of aggressive driving. It's important to state at this time that based on the communication and engagement of stakeholders, vertical realignments are not permitted in roads under jurisdiction of town of Orangeville. These modifications of the vertical alignment are elements as speed humps, speed bumps, speed tables, and these type of elements that requires a modification of the alignment in a vertical way on roads under the town's jurisdiction. The following slides are going to provide a brief description about how these other traffic calming measures works, as well as examples of the type of measures that you may see implemented in the future in the town of Orangeville. The first one is horizontal deflection. As the name said, the purpose of this horizontal deflection is to reduce vehicular speed for two different methods. One, to reduce the width of the roadway, and also to shift the direction of the vehicle in a way that forces the driver to reduce the speed. In this case, as observed in this example, that is a chicane, the road is narrow in one section of the road with the use of a curb extension. In this way, a modifications of the movement of the vehicle will generate a reduce on the speed of the vehicle. Examples of these horizontal deflections are chicanes in which the alignment of the road is changed with two different elements. A curb radius reduction that only change at intersections, and lateral shift that technically is a chicane with just one side of the road alignment change. It is important to note that for this type of traffic calming measures, the expected speed reduction will be higher for this type of treatments than the rest of the treatments that I'm going to present in the following slides. Roadway narrowing. This one works in the same way that an horizontal deflection, but it doesn't use a physical element. The intent of this type of treatments is to suggest the driver that the road is narrow. And I need to stress the point of suggestion, because this type of measures works from a psychological effect. The effect of the driver considering that the road is changing, that the roadway is narrow, and that they need to reduce the speed. This psychological effect is generated by different elements. One of them is lane narrowing, in which paving markings is used to make this apparent reduction of the right of way. Raised median islands that physically reduce the width of the road, and vertical center line that, although is a physical modification of the road, is something that we can say temporary, since these elements that you see in the screen can be removed during winter conditions. Also, you can narrow the road with the use of on-street parking. Technically, on-street parking is not a traffic calming, but in some occasions, it can reduce physically the width of the road in which it's implemented, with the consequent reduction or expected reduction on the speed of the driver. Road diet, once again, here is before you have 4 lanes to change to 3 lanes. It will reduce the speed. It has a consequence of the reductions on the number and the width of the vehicular lanes. Paving markings is again a psychological measure to reduce the speed of the vehicles along a specific segment of the road. As the name said, is used paint to generate paving markings that provides this suggestion. The suggestion will be a reduction of on the width of the road, or to alert the driver that the type of environment surrounding the road is changed, and they need to change the speed as long as there are in this type of environments. Examples of the paving markings is converging chevrons, in which the distance between the chevron change in order to suggest the driver that the speed is increasing and generate an effect on production. Dragon speed, four-lane traverse bars, as well as specific elements, for example, on road sign paving markings that suggest that there is something there that the driver needs to be advised, as well as peripheral transfer bars. The last iteration of this type of measures includes enforcement and education. This is important because although the last two types of measures that we discussed and introduced to you reflects physical changes to the roadway in order to generate a change of behavior of the driver, enforcement and education also change the behavior of the driver due to specific elements. As indicated in the figure, these elements advise the driver regarding the speed in which they are driving. Technically provides a reinforcement about how over the speed they are driving and that they need to do something as consequence of this speed. Aside of enforcement, this type of elements provide, for example, the speed display and the road safety messaging with a increase on the awareness of the driver and the society in general about the issue, in this case, speeding along a specific road. So, how the town is going to implement this type of measures? One item is to identify what are the measures that can be implemented, and the other is how this is going to happen. There are specific principles that defines how traffic calming operates. I'm going to spend some moments identifying this, although the implementation process described in a better detail this one. But it's important to understand that traffic calming doesn't provide a solution to all traffic problems. So an important item that needs to be identified at the beginning is what is the real problem? If the problem is something that traffic calming can solve or reduce, traffic calming is an option. But if there are other operational or safety problems that needs to be addressed, staff will need to identify those in order to not only suggest traffic calming as a solution, but also to direct the work to a more specific type of solution rather than something that is not going to work or that is not going to work 100% of the time. Problem needs to be quantified, and we will discuss that one in the next slides. Minimize impacts on delivery of emergency services, and we are presenting this from the very beginning, not allowing the use of vertical deflections as part of the suitable traffic calming measures for the town. Minimize impacts on adjacent residential streets that will be addressed with a review of each location as part of the implementation process. And of course, monitor and following up. Town needs to confirm that whatever is implemented, it's going to really works and not only is going to be a temporary measure. So the implementation process proposed to the town, and remember, we are going to finalize this process and the identification of the measures based on public feedback and comments provided by you during this opportunity, is based on the following elements. Determination if traffic calming is required. A context review. Determination of the level of required action. Selection of suitable traffic calming measures. And we will do it in the following way. We discussed with the staff to use this type of diagram, I need to say is the draft version of the diagram, because we want you to be aware about the specific issues that we are going to deal with the review of the implementation process. As you see in the diagram, there are specific elements that the staff is going to review prior to identify if traffic calming can be implemented as part of a request. Of course, this process starts with a request. The request could come from members of public or directly from a staff review. A staff will identify if the location in which this traffic calming is requested can be implemented, meaning that there are specific physical characteristics of the location that allow the use of traffic calming. If the answer of the review is yes, staff will proceed with the second part of the implementation process. And as you see in your screen, an important element is what is the posted speed. And most probably staff and us, we will have a good discussion about this in the following days, because as you well know, the town has a policy in which most of the local roads are posted 40 kilometers per hour. The posted speed is not the problem. The problem that we will need to deal and confront is that the next trigger to identify if a traffic calming can be implemented is the 85 percentile speed. Sometimes people ask us why you use 85 percentile and not the average. Well, the 85 percentile can provide us with the speed in which 85% of the drivers are up or under that speed. And that measure allows us to remove outliers and have a much better and adequate identification of what is the speed that we can see on the road. And we will need to stress that part right now, because if all roads are posted 40, the most common speed at this road will be probably between 10 to 15 kilometers per hour over the posted speed, especially because this is posted 40. And if that's the case, every single time that the staff is going to identify the speed, most probably they are going to identify that it's a speeding problem, because it's going to be most probably over 50 kilometers per hour. We are discussing with the staff right now how we are going to deal with this situation, because the intent is not to remove the existing bylaw, but we will need to confirm how the implementation process will solve or minimize this potential issue. Finally, after this review, staff is going to identify if traffic calming is required. If not, is the intention to identify the locations in which these type of treatments are not required and keep it ineligible for 5 years for any future traffic calming requests. The last part of the implementation process will be to identify which type of traffic calming measure can be implemented at the location in order to solve the potential issue. Once again, we use this table to identify that if there are speeds over, let's say, 50 kilometers per hour, and we need to reduce, or staff needs to reduce all the way to the posted speed of 40, there are limited alternatives that they can use, and most of them will be physical modifications to the roadway. After all of this review is completed, staff will decide what is the best design for the location into consideration, and is going to identify what are the cost implications. Since cost of traffic calming measures depends not only of the type of measure, but also the location of the measure, it's hard to say in average how much is the cost of the implementation. For that reason, every single time, staff will have this analysis, and if funds are not available, the solution may be implemented in future years pending budget approval and not has an immediate response to the problem. As I mentioned to you before, we try to have this under 15 to 20 minutes. So now it's an opportunity for comments and feedback. We were indicated that the public can provide comments directly to Mr. Lackey on or as part of the town's website. This is what I have this time. By all means, I open to respond questions or comments that you may have. Thank you.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Garcia, for your presentation. We have some councillors that wish to ask some questions. Councillor Andrews and then Councillor Sherwood. Go ahead, Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Garcia, I appreciate the information, and Mr. Lackey as well for leading this particular part of our public meeting tonight. A lot of information to digest, and I know that my fellow councillors, we think collectively when it comes to community safety, road safety, but we also see a community that is in fact growing and changing in many different ways. I do appreciate some of the different designs. I also appreciate the amount of information that you've identified regarding the process, which is going to be very important. I do have a couple of questions, but also just a further comment, if am I allowed to, Your Worship. The thought of traffic calming is really paramount in many different communities. I saw on some of your slides you have the city of Kingston. I'm aware of the city of Mississauga, which of course are municipalities that are significantly larger than ours. But it doesn't negate the differences doesn't negate the increase of amount of vehicles that are on our roads. We have a community that has a very large number of people who are commuting back and forth, and also happen to have a number of vehicles in their driveways. And not going to isolate and identify those locations, but we all know there are a number of vehicles that exist. Having said that, we're in a situation where we find people who are, of course, rushing through their days and sometimes ignore the posted speed limits. And I think that this opportunity to implement further traffic calming is really, really important. I know that council, we debated, as we're very much aware, the McCannell as well as the Rolling Hills matter. Regarding a couple of designs, I'm most appreciative of the idea that that was kind of taken off the table in your presentation here, Mr. Garcia, regarding the vertical deflection, such as speed bumps. There are some examples where emergency services would have some difficulties, and I know that in previous discussion we had that brought up even through emergency services. The question I wanted to ask is, when we're implementing some of these, what, in your opinion, is the most cost-effective approach? I know that you've made reference to more of the visual lines, which psychologically can end up altering people's ability to maybe accept the fact that there is a change in the road. In your opinion, is that kind of the most cost-effective way to implement traffic calming in a community such as ours?
Yes, Mr. Ron, to you, Mr. Andrews. Yeah, all depends on what is the type of problem that we have. Although I can generalize and say, yes, this is the most cost-effective measure that we can implement. I will answer your question in two parts. Let's say that if you have a speeding problem in which speed needs to be reduced due to the level of speeding over the posted speed, or the type of environment in which this speeding is being observed, horizontal deflections will provide you with the best value for money, meaning that it will require modifications of the roadway, but it's going to be something that will reduce the speeding problem, because the drivers will be forced to reduce it rather than depend on the behavior. The second part is, fortunately, this is not the most general situation. Most of the time, the situation can be also addressed through education, enforcement, and modifications of driver behavior. In this case, it's important to note that traffic calming is not the silver bullet. If I may, you really want to avoid the use of traffic calming, you need to modify the design of your roads. Yes. That's the most important part. We usually suggest our clients that if they can start modifying the design of new developments in order to reduce the speeding through design, that's the best approach. And that's the most cost effective, because you don't need to pay for that. The developer is going to pay for that part. Unfortunately, when the situation happens and you have the problem in existing neighbor, we suggest start with a temporary approach, meaning, for example, vertical center lines and paving markings, to suggest the driver that they are driving in an area that doesn't allow the speeding is an adequate approach. If you still perceive that there is a problem, horizontal deflection has a more long-term alternative can be implemented. So from the cost-benefit perspective, starting with an adequate identification of the problem, use of temporary, I'm going to quote, the temporary treatments has vertical certain lines and paving markings before any horizontal deflection will be a good and adequate approach from the time.
Mr. Garcia, thank you for that. And I absolutely agree regarding the education. Volume and speed play, I guess, important part of this particular discussion. And also, more importantly, the consistency of our road design too moving forward will play also an important role on how this ends up being accepted by our population. So thank you so much for the presentation, and I'll allow my other council members to ask their questions.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Garcia, for your presentation. You made note on page 23 or 29, the implementation process. One of the things that I have a little bit of a concern over is if the request is not advanced further, that it's not ineligible again for a minimum of 5 years. I personally would like to see that reduced down, possibly 2 years, maybe 3 years max. There are situations where we have developments that happen and it can change the whole traffic on the street. And we've had some neighborhoods that have stayed in their certain state for multiple years, and then all of a sudden a development comes, brings 150 homes there, and man, boy, traffic changes. So I am not in favor of that part of it. If there's any way we could make a recommendation. My first thought was a minimum of 2 years, but I would be okay with 3, but not in support of 5. I'm hoping that the rest of my councillors, I can see by some nods of heads, we all know that we have some developments coming up that are going to change certain neighborhoods drastically. And I just don't think it's fair that we say, no, you can't bring that to us for 5 years.
Thanks, Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Peters.
Can I respond to the question?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, so, Madam Sherwood. If I remember well, if I'm not, sorry, I forgot to put it, it's 5 years if nothing drastic change.
Okay.
So in the case that, as you correctly say, a new development happens or something change, the staff will be able to revisit that location. So unless council is not happy with the 5 years, with the trigger that is something drastic change, I think we can suggest the staff to reduce the 5 years. But yeah, we put the caveat there, and you are totally correct. If something changed, the staff can review it again.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments. First, I was happy to see that the vertical elements are not being considered. We know those cause more trouble than good that they do on the roadways. To Councillor Sherwood's point, thank you for the clarification, Mr. Garcia, about the things changing. That's an important point. What we want to avoid is the same roadway being tested every 18 months and staff having to go through the same exercise of denying a request or if the data is not there to support it. So I like the idea of keeping the 5 years and looking at, obviously, if circumstances change drastically, then we revisit it. The question I had through you to Mr. Lackey was the threshold of 750 vehicles per day. Just wondering if you could give us a sense of what roadway might be near that threshold, or perhaps an example of a road that is far less and one that's far more, just to give everyone a sense of where that 750 number lies.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Peters. As an example, Broadway has 20,000 cars a day, and a small residential street would be in the order of 400. For example, Elizabeth Street would be 8,000 in that neighborhood. So you get a sense that it's more the local residential streets that would fall into that category.
Thank you. Yeah, I like a lot of the things that were presented today. I'm a big fan of the speed displays, particularly on the entry roads into town that are sort of clobbering us over the head. But hey, you're now entering the urban environment. It's time to slow down. So some of the main entry points into town, I think it would be good to have those displays there. The horizontal deflection, I think, is great. I've seen it in many other municipalities. You know, the idea of squeezing you into a lane automatically makes you slow down, as Mr. Garcia had said. And you know, I've even seen entries to subdivisions with a squeeze point and with some decoration. So sort of says, hey, you're now entering a subdivision. This is where children are playing. You know, slow down, and they're very well done. So looking forward to the further conversation, and I'm sure town staff's going to come up with some excellent recommendations for those streets that require additional traffic calming. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess through you to Mr. Lackey. Mr. Lackey, I'd be very curious to see that list of streets and the vehicles per day. If there was a way to share that out with council post the meeting, I'd be grateful to understand that. Elizabeth at 8,000 cars per day, I just find that shocking that it would be that much, but what do I know? And so I guess I'd be curious to understand that list of what streets would be eligible for 750, and if there might be a recommendation from staff about streets that are under 750 that we would all hear about. You know, for example, I would suggest that Cedar Drive, again, I was surprised at 8,000 for Elizabeth, but I would suggest that Cedar Drive probably doesn't hit the number. That would be my bias, but who knows if that's right, given your numbers. Yet I receive a lot of calls about Cedar Drive. So it would be a shame to me if we missed out on making meaningful change and we boxed ourselves in with numbers. The other piece is on the 5 years, council members, if I could, and I know this is just a preliminary piece, but I don't like it at all. You know, I gathered the extra point that Mr. Garcia gave us, but if you think about it, if we put something in play right now and it failed and we couldn't get it for 5 years unless something meaningful change, that means not only do we not get to do anything about it for the rest of this council, but next council that's going to be elected in a year can't touch it at all for their entire time. And I'm not sure that's correct either, or what we had thought. And then the last piece is, I know this is preliminary, But I think that this implementation process needs to be a shared responsibility. Like, I recognize that we're an oversight body, and I can hear Mr. Brennan and his speech to me now. But at the same time, I'm on the front lines. I'm dealing with residents who have concerns, and lots of times, to be honest with you, maybe I'm just a sad sack, but they're valid concerns, and you know, they're really big to these people. And if I had to say, well, actually, I don't have any say here, it really goes through staff, and they determine everything. I don't think that's right either. And believe me, Mr. Jones knows way more than I would ever know about these items. It's just that we're public facing. I'm not ready to cede the responsibility for that. So I guess those are my concerns as we sit here today. And I don't know. This has to play out a little bit further for me, to be honest with you. I'm not ready to give up my autonomy.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I'm going to allow Mr. Jones to make a comment, but I would think the concern for staff is that perception is not necessarily reality, and that you know, every traffic complaint that's received, I mean, we'd have to hire another team of experts to respond to all of them. So I think once a street's been investigated and there's no significant changes on that street, that's it, you know, for some period of time. And if 5 years is it, then so be it. Mr. Jones, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to comment. Ultimately, you know, and I appreciate Councillor Taylor's comments on the matter about it being a shared responsibility and maybe not have the once every 5 years. Ultimately, it comes down to whether council wants a policy that's data-driven or a policy that is perhaps a little bit more subjective. Ultimately, as engineers, we like data, and we like to be able to take a look at things and evaluate it based on the number of vehicles per day, based on speed limits and this sort of thing, so that we can have a repeatable, defensible, consistent approach to the way that we would implement traffic calming. If we are going to go through that process, it's good to know that we have a policy that's been approved by council, so that when we say to a resident, we've gone through the process and it doesn't appear that this road is eligible for traffic calming, that, you know, we wouldn't be going back and looking at it again a short time later unless there's been a significant change.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Councillor Post.
Thank you very much. I'm really appreciative of the presentation today. I think you covered off a lot of really great points. And I know that you've taken vertical alignment off of the table. It is something that we do hear often from residents is, why don't we just put speed bumps on that road? And we've heard all of the reasons why, but I think some of the pushback we get from residents is that a lot of our neighboring municipalities do have speed bumps under the same weather conditions and emergency service conditions that we do. So just while we've got you here and while we've hopefully got residents listening in, could you go through, either yourself, Mr. Garcia, or yourself, Mr. Lackey, why the horizontal alignment is a better option for us than the vertical?
Can I start, John, and after
Mr. Garcia and then Mr. Lackey? Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. That's a very good question, and we usually have in our pack of tools vertical deflections. And we have it because it's an extreme measure. You really have a speeding problem between probably 12 to 18 kilometers per hour over posted speed. The only way that you can reduce the speed is with a vertical deflection. Unfortunately, you will have an effect on all type of vehicles using that facility, included transit, emergency services, fire department, that sometimes, not in all municipalities, will create a problem. I'm going to use a response that one time a fire chief told me, and he told me, for me, all roads are emergency routes, and I am responsible to council for the compliance with my response time. And I was not able to dissuade them that, yeah, probably when traffic calming is not going to affect the timing, but if you put 10 along the entire road, that's going to create a problem. So yes, it's a hard decision to make for each municipality. In this case, for the town, we hear clearly from OPP, Emergency Service, and Fire Department that they don't want to see vertical deflections as part of the tools of traffic calming measures. So again, probably is a particular response to the town, but we hear the stakeholders to say that very clear and loud. John?
Thank you. Mr. Lackey.
Through your worship to Councillor Post, I think Mr. Garcia explained it really well. We did have a stakeholder meeting where the emergency services, fire department, the OPP all discouraged the use of vertical deflections as it affects the response times. It is a health safety issue as well. The second reason perhaps might be when you implement a vertical deflection, what you may end up doing is translating that traffic problem onto another street. And so we try to avoid that situation as well. But it is significantly because of the response that we got from emergency services, why we dropped it from the selection process.
Wonderful. I appreciate those comments, and I hope that any residents that are watching can understand the reasoning behind that. I think it's valid. Thank you.
Great. All right, Mr. Garcia, Mr. Lackey, thank you very much. We have one more
worship,
resident.
if I may.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, just from my, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Your Worship. Just from my understanding through you to Mr. Lackey, can you just tell me again what next steps are? Can you just take us through the process? I know we have it here today, but what exactly are you presenting in November then? Is this your Bible of how things are going to go moving forward? Is that what we're going to see? It's a process that you're putting in place?
Through your worship to Councillor Taylor, yes, tonight we will take the comments that we receive and any others that we receive from the general public, and we will look at the report that we've got to date, and we will make edits and present that back to you in November.
Okay, and then Your Worship, if I may follow up, when will we get to the specific items around town that are still outstanding? You know, there's items that we're waiting on, and we're waiting on this traffic study to be able to get back to them and implement them. You know, candidly, Settlers Creek and Spencer Avenue is on my mind. What is the plan there?
Through your worship to Councillor Taylor, we have provided those streets to Mr. Garcia, and there will be some input in regards to those specific streets when we come back with the report.
In November, sir?
In November, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right, gentlemen, thanks again. We have another delegate, Mr. Stuart Gunn. Mr. Gunn, are you available? You have to press *6 if you're just calling in.
Hello?
Mr. Gunn, go ahead, sir.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, this is Stuart Gunn.
Yeah. Hi, Stuart. You wanted to make some comments about traffic calming?
I certainly do. This is Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Yeah, this is an issue very, very close to my personal heart, and it's part of my daily life. So I couldn't not take the opportunity to speak to it because I'm someone who has called the police many, many times. I have, Mayor Brown will attest, I've written a letter to him previously on this issue. And yeah, so just a little bit of background before I get into my specific issues. I've lived in Orangeville for 20 years now as a homeowner and a resident. I lived in on Broadway to starting in 2002 at Zina Street, and that was before the bypass. And so I'm sure everybody remembers what traffic was like on Broadway then. So I'm no stranger to traffic. But now I reside in one of the little post-war houses on 3rd Street. I'm sure all of you are well aware of those houses. And I can tell you, Broadway to 3rd Street was from the frying pan into the fire. It was a real wake-up call. And yeah, the traffic here is it's an ongoing problem. It is honestly the number one concern for me in this community. It is a bane on my daily life. I am a person, I have given up, me and my family have given up driving a car in large part in response to the climate crisis and the world that we are living in. And so I am a full-time commuter. I go to work on foot. I grocery shop on foot. I ride my bike. I cross-country ski, but I don't drive a car other than, I rent one occasionally, but I'm committed to making these changes in my life. And so every time I leave my house, I don't have a sidewalk on my side of the street, and I have to step out. I have cars coming at me left and right at high speeds. It's now supposed to be a 40 zone. It's not even close the way most people move. But it is a daily issue for me. So going back a little while, a couple of years ago, it's actually going back more than a couple, 2016, I was in Idlewild Park, which my house backs onto Idlewild Park. And I was having just an afternoon chat with my partner, and all of a sudden I heard a thump and looked over at the intersection. It's right over by the Rotary Park parking lots. And a woman had been knocked down in the intersection by a Volvo SUV. And so I saw this happen in front of me. I was like, oh my God, she's been hit. And the person, unfortunately, in the Volvo didn't see that they'd hit someone, and they started driving again. And they dragged this poor woman about 20 feet under the car along the pavement. And I was one of the first people on the scene. I was absolutely traumatized by that. And that, you think in this neighborhood, quiet little, leafy residential neighborhood, narrow streets, sidewalks on one side of the streets all around here. The streets aren't wider than Wellington Street. And yet here this happens, and you think this has got to be a once in a lifetime. But then I think back, when I was writing this and thinking about what I was going to say, and I thought, no, 2 years earlier, June 19th, 2014, a drag racing car went going south on 3rd Street. And I don't know if any of you remember this, but it launched over Broadway and crashed into Henry's lawnmower and tractor shop there. And it's like this is a dangerous place to live. We have stunt driving constantly. Any Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, we have people stunt driving up and down the road. We have people, and during the day, no one's going 40. Everyone's going 50, 55, 60. We have aggressive drivers. If someone living on this street, you cannot get out of your driveway going backwards. You have got to leave your driveway going forwards, or else it's going to take you 20 minutes to get out with the traffic. So if you try to back in, everybody's honking at you. People are pulling around you and giving you the finger. We have people with loud mufflers every summer night. It's, from 7 o'clock until 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. Every 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, another car with a super loud muffler goes by, waking you up, waking your kids, scaring the heck out of you. We have people doing donuts every time there's snow in a parking lot in Rotary Park. Someone in a pickup truck is out doing donuts for 20 minutes at a time. Friday, Saturday night, the Zara's parking lot is where they do donuts in their fancy souped up cars. This is the neighborhood I live in. This is constant, and it is absolutely wearing me down. And I just am glad, I'm really thankful that council is finally taking the time to start looking at this, because things have got to change. We all have to change our behavior. This is for as much as I appreciate this, it feels a little bit like tinkering around the edges, and that we need to deal with our traffic problem. Like, we as a town, we as a society, we have got to change, and we don't have a lot of time. And this is not, it's not just us in Orangeville. These changes have got to happen everywhere. But what can we do in Orangeville? We can try to reduce traffic. A street like 3rd Street should not have, I counted, I did a 10-minute count from 12:35 to 12:45 today, and I counted 88 cars. So to Todd Taylor, when he was saying you can't imagine 8,000 cars a day on Elizabeth Street, I'm sure it could be much higher than that. At 88 cars in 10 minutes, that's over 500 cars in an hour. And that's on a rainy, drizzly October Monday afternoon, right? That's not prime time. It's not rush hour. It's not a long weekend. There's literally times when the traffic is backed up all the way from down by Walmart all the way up to Broadway. And this is, once again, my house, my front door and my living room, I'm like 40 feet from the actual roadway. Anyhow, thank you very much for giving me the time to speak, and I hope that I hope this all goes somewhere, and I hope some serious changes are coming.
Yeah. Well, Stuart, as you'd remarked, the 40-kilometer speed limit has been implemented in most streets in Orangeville. That's, I think, a big step forward, but it sounds to me like there needs to be some additional enforcement on 3rd. I know since the RioCan Mall opened up, the nickname of 3rd Street was Highway 3, and it's been that way for 15 years now. So we need to step it up. I know you and I have had conversations, but this professional approach of traffic calming with engineers involved to make recommendations, to spend the necessary money to do this, is we're in the middle of it now. Hopefully by the end of the year we'll have some recommendations, but sounds like we need some additional enforcement going on 3rd. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Taylor, do you have your hand up again?
Yes, sir, I do. If I could, I just wanted to give some extra information to Mr. Gunn. And first of all, I'm aligned with his comments. I'm concerned too about the traffic. It's been an unintended pet project of mine since we got on the council. However, I do want to share with everyone what the OPP is doing. And it's relatively new, but they have recently, under the leadership of Inspector Ward, changed some of their priorities within the county. And that has enabled them to create a traffic division. And that traffic division is getting up and running now. And I apologize if it's not this week, it's very shortly that it will be up and running. There'll be a dedicated group throughout the county with special emphasis on our little town, to enforce the law and catch the speeders and be on the lookout, essentially. And the other thing I'd want to share is if neighborhoods are having specific issues, there is an ability to have a community liaison officer visit and chat with the neighbors and understand, and that, the officer is from the OPP, to be clear. I was at a meeting this past week on Zina Street. Quite a few of the people that live on the street were there, and Officer Jennifer Roach was out and offering tidbits of what they can do and what they can expect from the OPP. So they are starting to work into our neighborhoods with their community outreach program, and I think you'll see them, enforcing the law in terms of traffic on a more regular basis. And I think to everyone's point, this is just a stopgap. I mean, we need this other things here that Mr. Garcia has spoken to, but anyway, it's something for now, and we should take solace in that during the short term while we wait for these other initiatives to take place. So just wanted to share that. Thank you, Your Worship.
All right, again, Mr. Gunn, thank you for joining us tonight, and
thank you, Mayor Brown.
All of those incidents that you witnessed. I'm sorry that you and your family have been put through this, but we're going to continue to work on this. 3rd Street really needs some special attention, I think. I'm with you on that completely.
I absolutely agree. And, even a lower speed limit, 30 has been found to be much safer when there are human to vehicle collisions, and possibly even things, maybe look at making a one-way street going south to north, or it's no time to be timid when you're talking about people's daily life and the impacts of massive amounts of traffic on health and well-being. So just food for thought, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
All right. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Deputy Mayor McIntosh. As is protocol, public meetings and statutory public meetings are to be run by the Deputy Mayor. I overstepped my bounds on item 10.1 as we started, and I did apologize to the Deputy Mayor, but I'm going to turn this over to him now. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Post, do you have a question?
I think that we need a motion to receive the traffic calming study, but also I was wondering if before we got into the next public meetings, if we could take a 5-minute break.
Very good. Yes, you are correct. So, Deputy Mayor, do you want to make ask for that motion?
May I, Mr. Mayor, just Yeah, I think it's still appropriate for Deputy Mayor McIntosh to give in the call-in details and seek if there are any other comments from the public with respect to this matter.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Post, I'll just do this and then we'll, if we have no comments from the public, we'll take a quick break. Anyone who would like to speak to this matter is to call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID number 529-422-410 #. Callers will be invited to provide their questions or comments following the conclusion of this meeting and presentation. So if anyone has any comments, they can call in now. Maybe in the meantime, we'll take a quick 5-minute break while we wait to see if there's any callers, if that's okay, Madam Clerk.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. You're on the line, *6, if you wish to speak on this particular matter.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor. It's Tracy Newman. I would like to speak on this matter.
Yes, Tracy, go right ahead.
Thank you. So I am the former chair or present chair, I'm not really sure, of the Rolling Hills Oak Ridges Traffic Committee. So traffic is something that is near and dear to the hearts of many folks that are in these two communities for a number of reasons that have already come before council. So first of all, I'd like to thank council for undertaking this important endeavor of doing an initial request to have a policy put in place, because it's definitely, as you've all heard directly and indirectly by numerous people, traffic is a major problem in Orangeville. So thank you very much for acknowledging that and having this put into place. So a couple of the questions that I had specifically to the report. Started first of all with the horizontal deflectors and the actual curb widening of the road. When we looked at the issue on Rolling Hills, one of the things that we did do was we talked to all of the emergency vehicles about different options that we could look at. And one that was discussed was the actual building of those curbs to change the physical laneway. And we had heard directly from fire and ambulance that they don't like those because they do impede their ability to get to an emergency. So is that something that has been looked at in this presentation?
Yeah.
You go ahead.
Yes, John, if I may.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
The issue that we need to identify and be conscious about the width of the roadway is that the specific vehicles, for example, the fire apparatus that the fire department use, it requires a specific width in order to respond to an emergency. Technically, the width of the vehicle is over 3.65, although the policies for fire department indicate 6 meters, but 6 meters is in order to allow the fire apparatus to extend the supports in case that they need to use the stairs in the fire apparatus. For emergency services, meaning the ambulance, the restrictions of the width of the road is not at that level. So although the Corp extension needs to consider the width of the emergency services vehicles, most of the time they don't have problems crossing at that particular location. Most probably what they refer is that the Corp radii, meaning the modification to the intersection, needs to consider the vehicle while moving, not only the width of the road. I do apologize if the explanation is too technical, but that's what sometimes emergency services requires from us.
Thank you. Would it be possible to add that information into the presentation? Because I think that type of disclosure and transparency is really important for people to be able to understand. And along with that, I know that the City of Ottawa, for their horizontal deflection, has got removable stakes as part of their package. So they are bolted seasonally into the road to do that same type of narrow, but they do have more of a give to them, because if they're struck, they actually do bend, so they're not sort of that same permanent structure. Has that been considered, that type of removable stake, into this presentation?
Once again, Jamie Garcia here. Yes, I need to say we worked for the City of Ottawa to prepare their traffic calming policy and guidelines. What you are referring, I believe, is the use of vertical center lines in which plastic bollards can be implemented during summer season, spring season, and needs to be removed during winter conditions. Some of the times, and some municipalities doesn't remove the vertical devices, but that all depends of how winter operations and maintenance provides the service along the road. What we know is that the drivers of the snow plows doesn't like to reduce the speed, because it reduces the efficiency of the plow. So usually we recommend the municipalities to have this type of removal devices as part of traffic calming measures.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, I have two more questions if I'm allowed to have that time. I don't want to impede if I'm not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the flow-through chart that was presented that talked about if it's a yes, it goes here, if it goes a no, it goes there. Am I correct in understanding that this is a policy for staff of the town of Orangeville to look at? So if there was an issue that was said, responded to as a no by staff, do the citizens still have the ability to appeal to the councillors, and do the councillors maintain the ability to bring issues, even though it's a no on that flow-through chart, to a vote at council?
Mr. Lackey, that might be one for you.
Perhaps I'll
Mr.
jump in,
Chairman.
Deputy Mayor.
Yep, Mr. Jones, go right ahead.
Thank you. Ultimately, any policy that's passed by council is a policy of council, and if council chooses to override its own policy, it's certainly within its purview.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Jones. The last question that I had was, you spoke specifically to the vehicles per day and the 85th percentile of over the 50 mark speed. When we did our traffic studies through the OPP on Rolling Hills specifically, and it could be because it was the summer, so school traffic wasn't in, but I don't believe that we met either of those marks. Sorry, let me correct that. I don't believe that we met the 750 vehicle per day mark on Rolling Hills, which is a collector road under the description of Orangeville. And the speed of 10 to 15 over was definitely closer to 25 over. So my question would be, when was the last time that there was actually a study on the vehicle per day on roads of Orangeville? And when was the last time that there was actually a study done to check the speed to see if we would meet those marks that you're, potentially voting on in November to accept or decline?
Mr. Lackey?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the caller, I'm not aware of any recent speed analysis done. We have done some traffic counts, and I have to check to make sure or to see if Rolling Hills was included. We had 20 locations throughout town that were just recently done, so I could share that information with you when I check exactly if Rolling Hills was included in that.
And if I can just end by saying thank you so much, Council, for taking this on, and to the town staff that's participating in it, because, traffic is a major concern for so many people. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Is there anybody else on the line with any questions? Again, *6 on your phone. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. And that is the statutory public meeting for 236 First Street, otherwise known as OPZ-2021-01. Anyone who wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic can submit their name, phone number, mailing address, and email address to planning@orangeville.ca or call 519-941-0440 extension 2254 and reference the file number OPZ-2021-01, and note that any information collected will be a matter of public record. So we now have a presentation by our senior planner, Ms. Russell. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, and those in attendance. This is a public meeting being held in accordance with our requirements of the Planning Act in consideration of an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment that have been submitted to the town. The purpose of the public meeting is to share information about the applications with council, members of the community, and to obtain comments and answer any questions. A recommendation or decision on the application will not be made tonight. An information report has also been included in this evening's agenda and provides more detail about the applications. The applicant is also in attendance and will be providing more details about their applications. They'll be available to answer any specific questions raised by councils as well as members of the community. The official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications were filed by MHBC Planning on behalf of Services and Housing in the Province, otherwise known as SHIP. They were submitted and deemed complete on September 2nd, 2021, and the applications are proposing the conversion of the existing motel through internal renovations into 27 supportive housing units consisting of 25 studio suites and 2 two-bedroom suites. The subject property is located on the west side of First Street, south of Starview Crescent, just west of Highway 10, and north of Hanson Boulevard. The subject land is legally described as part of Lot 3, Concession 2, within the town of Orangeville and County of Dufferin, and is municipally known as 236 First Street. The subject land has a lot area of approximately 0.94 hectares, with approximately 112 meters of frontage along First Street. The subject land is currently developed with a motel known as the Maple Inn and has a double access off of First Street. The aerial photo shows the existing site context, and as you can see, the property is surrounded by a mix of uses, which includes residential, commercial, and open space. The applicant has submitted the site plan in support of the application. The development proposal consists of the conversion of the existing motel into 27 supportive housing units. There are no proposed changes to the overall footprint of the building. Minor modifications to the exterior of the building, including facade improvements, new windows, are proposed. An increase in the open space in the front of the building at the entrance is also proposed. And in the rear, there is a proposal for a community garden, future playground, and playing field area, as you can see on this site plan. The double access off of First Street is proposed to remain. The applicant will further discuss the details of the proposal as part of their presentation. The subject property is designated service commercial in the Orangeville official plan, which permits a range of commercial uses as listed on the slide. There is a special provision, E811, which adds a retirement home as a permitted use. In order to facilitate the proposed development, an official plan amendment is required. The official plan amendment proposes to add supportive housing as a permitted use, in addition to the site-specific permissions for the retirement home. The underlying service commercial land use designation will remain unchanged. The subject property is also zoned service commercial, C3, in our zoning bylaw, which permits a range of commercial uses as seen on the slide. Once again, special provision 2441 adds a retirement home as a permitted use. In order to facilitate this proposed development, a zoning bylaw amendment is required, and the zoning bylaw amendment proposes to amend the site-specific provision in order to add supportive housing as a permitted use. The amendment also seeks to reduce the required parking from 47 to 38 spaces, and the underlying service commercial zone will remain unchanged. The applications have been circulated to internal departments and external agencies for comment. All comments received to date have expressed no concerns, and we haven't received any comments from the public to date. So today we held our statutory public meeting. In terms of next steps, the Planning Division will await receipt of all internal and external comments in order for the applicant to address. Then we'll prepare a recommendation report for a council decision. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Larissa. We'll now hear from Julianne von Westerholt from MHBC Planning. Julian?
Yes, good evening.
Yes, go right ahead.
Good evening, Your Worship, Mayor Brown, and members of council, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Julianne von Westholt. I'm a senior planner at MHPC Planning, and I'm here and pleased to be here on behalf of our clients, Services and Housing in the Province, or SHIP for short, and the Adaptive Reuse Supportive Housing Project proposed at this address. Okay. Do I have to share screen? Yeah. Okay. So, just going to share my screen with you as we go through the presentation. Okay. All right, this is an image of the subject property for those of you that may or may not be familiar with it. Right. The project is to convert the existing building that was used as a former motel into an affordable housing units for Orangeville's most vulnerable persons. This has been a collaborative effort amongst all of the architectural, planning, engineering, and surveying firms listed on this slide. It's really important to mention also that the Town of Orangeville staff expedited the processing of these applications so as to bring this important matter before council as soon as possible, as many of you are aware that these types of projects are directly tied to how quickly the units can be provided to fill the need. Thank you for all that were involved in this project. This is a slide that basically shows the location of the subject lands at 236 First Street. The aerial photo, Highway 10 is located immediately to the east of the subject lands, and to the north we have Starview Crescent, which has residential uses, as well as lands to the west also comprising residential uses, while lands to the south are predominantly commercial. The proposed redevelopment includes 25 studio apartments that are small, self-contained units suited for one-person households. There's also two bedroom units proposed. There's a common space for shared activities, including programs and supportive services, offices for staffs, and meeting rooms. The tenants will be governed by the landlord and tenant legislation. This will provide long-term supportive housing options for people experiencing homelessness. There will be 24-hour, 7-day-a-week staffing when it's required, and this will be professionally operated and managed by SHIP. The specific details about the operation or the day-to-day operation of the site or the services that are provided would probably be best addressed by those present that are currently employed by SHIP, namely either Mr. Thomas DiCarlo or Leslie Nagoda. They are here this evening to help with those types of questions after the presentation. In terms of the planning applications, a pre-submission meeting was held in January of this year, and official plan and zoning bylaw amendments were submitted late August, and they were deemed complete by the municipality on September 2nd, and we are holding our public meeting this evening. As Larissa explained, the subject lands are currently proposing to convert the existing motel into 27 supportive housing units. The lands have an existing designation with a special policy, E8.11, and this policy permitted the additional use of a residential care facility. And this particular amendment is proposing to further amend that special policy to also include supportive housing as a permitted use. And what's important to note is that the underlying service commercial designation remains unchanged. Similarly, in the zoning bylaw, the proposed zoning will also maintain the underlying service commercial C3 zone, and the special provision 2441, as Larissa mentioned, will also include an additional use, namely supportive housing. This is a similar approach between the two documents. This approach would permit the site to simply be adaptively reused in an existing building, and which makes it more efficient use of the lands. This is in keeping with all provincial policy directions regarding infill, adaptive reuse, and intensification, as well as the recent direction concerning provision of affordable housing. It is through the approval of these applications that the renovations and adaptive reuse of this building can occur, and the site can be used for the intended permanent supportive housing that is desperately needed in this community. This reuse will provide stability, support, and access to resources to the residents of the housing project and will improve the current situation of the subject lands, which were used to provide more of an emergency type or temporary type of shelter in response to the need during the COVID-19 pandemic. I now have a few slides for you that show the existing building from a few different vantage points. Besides the exterior facade improvements, there are also plans to improve the outdoor areas, including a playground as well as a community garden and a playing field. New trees are also proposed around the playing field and the southwest corner of the property. There will also be continuous planting beds proposed for the property at the front along the street elevation. The trees shown right here will remain as a buffer to the adjacent residential lands to the west, and a portion of the grassed area that is shown here will be changed to playing fields. This is the area where the future staff parking area will be located behind this portion of the existing building. Exterior and interior renovations are planned for the site. In conclusion, the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments are consistent with the provincial policy statements and they conform to the provincial growth plan. Proposed zone change conforms with the town's official plan. The proposed use will be permitted by the official plan and zoning bylaw through a special policy or provision and will not compromise the parent service commercial designation. The proposed zoning requests reduced parking, which is appropriate given the supportive housing use and supported by a parking study which was submitted in support of the applications. The location for the proposed use is appropriate and considers official plan direction to locate affordable housing in proximity to transit and services. The property will be a place that supports the city's most vulnerable population by providing a more permanent supportive housing solution with on-site supports and services. Improvements are proposed to the building and site. These include improvements to the exterior and interior of the building, as well as landscaping, lighting, the provision of a community garden, playing fields, and a playground as part of the outdoor amenity areas. On behalf of SHIP, we thank council and planning staff for the continued support of all the efforts to proceed with this application efficiently. Thank you, and I'm pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Westerholt. Council, we'll have one more presentation and then we'll get to your questions. So if I could call on Leslie Nagoda, Services and Housing in the Province.
Thank you and good evening. I believe that everything has been covered in the presentation. I don't have anything to add.
Thank you. That was quick. And do we have any questions from council? I had Mayor Brown. You had a question earlier on.
My question was answered in the presentation. I was just concerned about on-site staffing, and that was answered. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Post.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. This is a great presentation and it's a wonderful use of this property and land. As we've heard tonight already in previous presentations, this is a much needed addition to our community. I was really pleased to see in the proposal that it includes parkland and a community garden specifically. It'll definitely beautify the space. I also love that the location, because it's so close to amenities, its proximity is really good. But what I do feel is missing from the proposal is a safe pedestrian route, such as a sidewalk or a trail, so that pedestrians can safely access the rest of First Street, specifically the mall area. I know that there's no sidewalk there right now. Is that something that can potentially be included in this proposal? And I'm not sure who the right person to answer that question is. Thanks, Brandon.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Post, it's something we could certainly take back into consideration. However, I would suggest that infrastructure such as this perhaps would not be generated by a development proposal of this magnitude. Those conditions exist, and we would look more carefully at what is the land use change relative to what exists.
Okay, Councillor Post. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. I would assume that this particular question is posed to Ms. Nagoda. I am aware that there are some residents currently housed in that location. If this is proposed, or this proposal is accepted by council and moves ahead, is there going to be a phase-in period for some of the construction, and what will end up taking place with some of the residents that are currently housed there?
Yes, thank you for your question. As you indicated, the space is currently being used as a short-term program. We've been able to do this through redirecting some of SHIP's rent supplements. And to date, we've provided support to over 20 individuals in need in the community. So we do have a phased-in approach. So the short-term project, or short-term program rather, was a 3-month program. So individuals have slowly been moving out of the program as we begin to prepare for redevelopment and construction. And those individuals all moving out of the program have housing plans.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor. I've noticed in the staff report it's referred to as supportive housing. I've never heard of supportive housing before, but I've also heard the word affordable housing used in some presentations. So I'm trying to get clarification on this. Is this geared to income where they're purchasing a unit, or these are just temporary stays? That's what I'm trying to understand. Is this affordable housing purchasing, or is there a timeline that people are staying there? And I don't know who to address that to.
If I may, I can endeavor to answer that question. Supportive housing really helps people typically who are homeless or at risk of homelessness maintain stable housing. So it's a rent supplement and housing support. So typically a clinical person or a case manager provides support to that individual, and it's permanent housing as long as they need it. So it's rental market, or it's rental housing.
So typically these people could stay there ultimately forever.
Forever, as long as they need it. That's correct. Yeah, it's permanent supportive housing.
But they're not purchasing.
They're not purchasing. That's correct. They're renting. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors with any questions? Councillor Post?
Perhaps a follow-up question. I did some kind of reflection of what Mr. Ward had said about the possibility of sidewalk or trail. Now, with that being said, perhaps my next question will be directed at Mr. Jones or Mr. Lackey, and it would be, will the upgraded transit system, once that's in place, will that be reached to that area as well? I'm just concerned that we're going to end up with a situation where people have a wonderful home that they can't get anywhere from safely. So will there be transit that will go directly to that spot?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Post, we're still finalizing the new route system, but I wouldn't expect that it would go quite that far north, because any further than this and we're in Mono. And exactly. So typically right now we do go to the Orangeville Mall, and I expect that would probably be the northern limit of the transit routes, which really isn't all that far from this facility.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? If not, are there any questions from the public? Madam Clerk, do we have anybody on the line?
Deputy Mayor, I think Keith Ward had his hand up there. Mr. Ward is with SHIP.
Oh, Mr. Ward, go ahead. *6 on your phone.
Well, I'm online here.
Oh, go ahead.
So I was just going to add a bit of more response to Leslie's answer about the affordable housing and supportive housing, because they are two separate things. It will be affordable housing as well. So even in the absence of the supports, it will meet the tests of affordability under the provincial policy guidelines. Although we have all geared to income, there is provision if theoretically, if somebody's income rises to the point where they don't actually need geared to income assistance, and that does happen, they will go to a market rent. That market rent will still be affordable under provincial definitions.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. If anyone in the public has questions, if they could push *6 on their phone and go ahead.
Hi there.
I'm a resident of on Starview Crescent currently.
Yes.
My young family I've lived here for 6 years, and I really value the safety and, the community aspect of this street. Well, I'm actually a big supporter of this initiative and understand the need for subsidized housing, especially for this community. We've certainly seen some concerns with what's happening there right now. We have seen over this past summer, some mostly security concerns, and I'm not saying that for the residents of Starview, but more the residents who are occupying the space right now. We've seen numerous intoxicated individuals throughout the day and night. We have seen, in particular, one young girl who clearly needs some help, and she's been camping on the front lawn in a tent in this area. And, there's been residents here who have stopped to help her make sure she's okay and provide her with food and some gift cards for restaurants in this area. But my concern is, it said, in the presentation that there will be some staffing support if needed. And I'm just curious what that actually means, because, we've seen tag security as well as the police there quite often. There was 1 week this summer where the police were there every day. And I'm just wondering what the support system will look like for the residents once, this becomes a permanent fixture in the community.
Who would like to answer that?
I can answer that. And I appreciate your concern, and safety is of utmost importance to us as well. And I think it's important to understand that during this temporary use of the space, we've been supporting our community's most vulnerable, often in their time of most need. So it's not uncommon that issues arise. As we talked about, we've been providing temporary housing to individuals, and they're very complex. So we can appreciate that there's been some attention to the space. We have addressed these issues as safely and respectfully as possible for the individuals involved, and we hope as well for the surrounding community. We're mindful of our presence, and we're making every effort to be a good neighbor as well. We understand that part of our role as a property owner is to be a good neighbor and hope that the surrounding community will embrace us. But we know that this may take some time. So it has been, as we indicated, a temporary use, and we're asking for a permanent residential use as we move forward. So we suspect that some of those issues that you have observed over the summer will be relayed with the change of the zoning. And so do you think there will be permanent support for the individuals living there? Like, my primary concern is, like, I met a young father, single father, and he has a 1.5-year-old son who is living, they're currently there right now. And in the same breath, I saw, a very intoxicated individual. I see this individual daily, wandering the parking lot and causing a bit of a ruckus, which has led to, of course, the police. And these are the types of situations, while it's not directly affecting me, I'm worried about, this young father with a young son, or, other residents living there. I think the idea of 24-hour support or something there, or supervision, is, would give a big peace of mind to the people in the community as well as the residents living there.
Mr. Ward, did you want to answer that? You're muted, sir.
You're muted, sir.
Yeah, as Leslie was saying, it's not going to be the same people. This is not an emergency housing. It will not be an emergency housing facility. It will be a permanent housing facility. So in that sense, in that capacity, it's going to have some different people in it. Some of the people that the neighbor's talking about, would be the sort of person that would be more likely to need the kinds of support that we were talking, the kinds of housing that we were talking about at the beginning of your meeting today. But the point is, yes, they're these are people whose needs are such that there will be several staff present in the building who will be providing support to them on an ongoing basis. The supports bend with the people, so we have to figure out what every single person needs and make sure that they're getting that kind of support. If there are needs overnight for security reasons, then we'll make sure that there is security there. So we'll always make sure that we deal with our own problems within our own place.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to answer my question, and best of luck with this endeavor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Is there any more questions from the public? *6 on your phone. Hearing none. Madam Clerk, do we need a motion? Hello, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Sorry. I'm also a resident of Starview. And,
Mr. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, if I can just ask that the two individuals, this one and the one previously, if they could perhaps just state their name for the record so that we can record that in the minutes, please.
Absolutely. Go ahead and state your name for the record, please.
my name is Chris Horsten, Horsten. I'm a resident of Starview as well.
Go ahead, Chris.
And, thanks very much for taking my call. One of my questions is to do with the fact that we have something called a family transition place already in Orangeville. And I'm wondering how this facility is going to differ if its focus is women, and I believe family transition place is largely that same kind of focus. Why does that facility get to have around-the-clock security and lockdown, and this one is not? I'm concerned that if the focus is women, that there might be, ex-spouses, boyfriends, or whatever who are going to be showing up and causing problems for those people that are there, especially if there's children that are going to be living there. From the sounds of it, that's the expectation if they're going to be building a playground. So how do they differ, and why does this one not warrant that same kind of care? The last caller mentioned some of the concerns in the neighborhood over the summer. Obviously those things have been ongoing. We haven't seen any evidence that there's been any effort to control any of that to date. So why will that be, or how will that be any different going forward? We've had a lot of people or a few people from the organization say, oh yes, we're going to do better, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But like I say, for the duration of the summer up until now, we haven't seen any evidence of that yet, because these problems are ongoing. About the only thing that we have seen done is the accumulation of shopping carts from the various shops around in the neighborhood have been removed finally. But I can say that one night I came home and there was one in the middle of the road that I almost took out with my pickup truck. And, that's a safety concern as well. But thankfully that issue seems to have been dealt with now, but the rest of the issues seem to be ongoing. So what's going to be done to show the residents that that this is being properly cared for and that there is supervision?
Who would like to answer that?
Sorry, I don't know if Keith's stand up, but I certainly can maybe just share about the distinction of family transition place is a family shelter. And again, the use of this space would be permanent housing. And as Keith Ward had indicated earlier, it would be a different population that would be housed in the building.
Okay, I'm thinking that these people are all would share the same, if I could use the label vulnerable, they're all vulnerable people. So, I'm wondering how are they going to differ if they're vulnerable people in a setting like that? Who's going to look after them at night? When boyfriends come calling, or ex-husbands, or whatever.
Keith has his hand up there, Deputy Mayor.
Keith, do you want to answer that? Keith Ward?
You're muted, Keith.
Okay. Well, again, these people aren't here on an emergency basis. They're not fleeing domestic violence. You know, those situations would have been dealt with by the time they get to us. So we're not responding to that type of concern. If we see issues in the building again, we will make sure we have a 24-hour presence from security just to control that. But that's, I have to say, that's very rare. That we find it necessary to do that, and usually it's just episodic. It occurs, you know, because we have a particular person who's causing problems, and we put a lid on it until it's dealt with, and then we're able to step back. So again, we're dealing with very different people. I mean, it's unfortunate in a way that, you know, we just don't have, again, as we heard earlier in the meeting, we just don't have the kinds of crisis supports sufficiently in the community to deal with people that have all those sorts of needs. But this is permanent housing. These are people who are tenants just the same as great many people in the town.
Did that answer your question?
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, certainly I hope to see that it is people who are past that point of transition and that are, you know, under the threat of violence, and that they're past that.
Yeah.
I
might add, and I'm going out on a limb here, Leslie, but you know, we've certainly had people express concerns wherever we've gone. I don't think that would be a surprise to any member of council. It's gotten a lot better because people, I think, understand in the last several years, understand these sorts of issues more. I can remember having some extremely nasty public meetings. But one of the things that we've always done in SHIP, and I've been associated as a volunteer for many years, and I used to help them in my professional life, is you know, if the neighborhood wants it, we're quite open to establishing a more formal liaison with the neighborhood as well. You know, so we certainly welcome that opportunity. Again, it's a good way for people for the organizations to get to know the neighbors and vice versa. We don't get into the privacy of the residents, obviously, but we can talk about how the relationships are working on an ongoing basis. We're totally open to that. And we have found that's worked in neighborhoods.
Ms. Brandon Ward, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And through you, I just thought it perhaps be prudent to point out an important distinction between this proposal versus the family transition place. That's termed as a crisis care facility in the context of our planning documents, which is certainly defined to include more emergency response and intervention for those that are in more immediate need of counseling and other supports. It's zoned institutional, which permits that sort of venture. Obviously, that is certainly different from what's before you with this proposal, which is truly more of a residential use format. It was noted that it's more of an affordable housing piece, albeit there are certainly going to be some supports offered at this facility, but it truly is a residential venture, and it's important to make that distinction.
Thank you. Mayor Brown, go ahead.
Well, if we've completed the discussion, I'd like to make a motion to receive this report, and looking for a seconder.
Councillor Sherwood. All in favor?
Yes.
Carried.
Deputy Mayor, yes, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, can I just ask that before you proceed to the next public meeting that we do get receipt of the report for item 10.2, please?
Traffic calming.
Oh, okay. Yes. Can we have a motion, Councillor Post, Mayor Brown? All in favor?
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, moving on.
Sorry, am I allowed to speak, or can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I'm kind of new to this forum, and I'm trying to navigate it. So,
Could we have your name and address, please? please.
Yeah. My name is Julie Ferguson, and I'm also a resident of Starview Crescent. And I watched the presentation, and I'm a little bit conflicted in the information that was provided in the presentation and a letter that all the residents of Starview, Brucedale, Victoria Heights, and Dodds received. And part of that notice that we received from SHIP is that this was going to be a women's, basically it's geared towards women. And there was no talk in the presentation that that was in fact the case. And then listening to the presentation before we got to this point was talking about the vulnerability of the men in Orangeville. And so I'm just kind of concerned because I've been on the street more than 20 years. So we were here when the John Howard Society also had taken up before it was a motel. And there was lots of, difficulties with that. And there was constantly police presence and people wandering up the streets, and there was people knocking on doors, and and as a resident here of with raising 3 children here, we've had the we feel very safe. Currently, right now, we don't feel very safe walking by that area. It's not well lit at night, and the letter talks about it being residence for women, but the presentation gave no indication of that. So is this going to be a co-ed kind of situation? Is there going to be men, women, families? Because if it's 25 units that sound more like bachelor studios and only 2 that have more extensive room, we're not looking at putting families in here. I'm assuming that I'm correct in that. So I'm concerned that the letter that we got as residents here and the presentation were a bit conflicting.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Thank you very much. So I think 2 things to address the safety or the lighting around the property. We plan to do a CPTED, so crime prevention through environmental design. So looking at kind of the physical space, looking at the lighting. So that will address that concern. And the letter that the community received is our efforts to engage the community, to communicate more regularly with the community about the efforts that are taking place on site. And we did early days when we first purchased the property, engaged our community partners such as Family Transition Place. So the plan is to address our Dufferin wait list. So we have a wait list for individuals waiting for supportive housing. So through this property, we would address our wait list as well as partnering with Family Transition Place. So that's perhaps where the confusion of the letter came up with looking at women's needs. We would also be addressing the county's by name list. So looking at a full approach for community engagement.
So if there were issues, who would you advise that the residents of this community call? Do we call the police? Do we call you if we're finding that there are people yelling and cursing at us as we walk by to go on an evening walk? Who do we address that to?
And this would be we're the landlord. We're the owner of the building. We're the landlord, and I would recommend that as we have discussed throughout our presentation, that this is a rental property. So if you feel unsafe, we would advise that you call the police, but we're also here to be part of the community. So as Keith Ward had indicated, we'll look at developing an advisory committee with our local community. So there'll be regular communication.
So, so just so that I'm clear, I used the QR code in the letter that was provided to me. I provided my email address, so I'm going to get information on that so that I could join this advisory committee?
That's correct.
Go ahead, Mr. Keith Ward.
I would just add again, because this is governed by the Residential Tenancies Act as any other tenancy situation, that gives us authority to deal with residents who are causing a problem to either themselves or to the neighbors within the building or to the broader neighborhood. So we obviously don't like to evict people, but sometimes we threaten them with that. So it's we we're a good landlord. We can't help people if we're not a good neighbor.
And I don't know whether this is a valid question or not, but because I was listening to the discussion prior to talking directly about SHIP, but they were talking about the people that were having, most vulnerable, having mental illness, sometimes addiction issues. So I guess my other question would be, other than providing them with affordable housing, what other supports are in place for them so that they can be helped through these difficulties?
Leslie should speak to that, but we have multiple supports available to them, both through our own staff, and they're very well qualified staff, including clinical staff, as well as supports that we arrange through other agencies. But Leslie can perhaps talk about that a bit more. That's what supportive housing is. It's bringing the supports into the housing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would have what we call our community mental health counselors, and they have a variety of backgrounds in nursing and social work, and typically with a focus in mental health, addictions, justice, homelessness. We also have other types of disciplines that we can call upon within our SHIP community, such as I talked about addiction specialists, but there's also trauma specialists. We also have hoarding specialists. We have tenant relations workers who really work with our tenants on how to be a good neighbor, how to maintain their tenancies. We have financial support workers. So like he said, just a really plethora of different disciplines that work towards keeping people stably housed and, as we've indicated, being a good neighbor in our communities.
So, but this will be a co-ed type of housing with men, women, and families. Is that correct? Am I correct in that assumption?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to answer my questions tonight.
Thank you, Julie. Is there anybody else in the public have a question?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, could I just add?
Yes.
There are only the two-bedroom units, so the families will be limited, to those units. The rest are for single-person occupancy, as the planner made clear in the report. So you're just talking about typically, one parent, one child in those units. As Mayor Brown knows, I used to be a general manager of Peel Living, the Region of Peel's nonprofit housing company with 7,000 units, and that's where I first bumped into SHIP. And I worked with them on sort of the other side of the fence, if I can put it that way, for more than 20 years. I joined SHIP after I retired. And one of the reasons I did that was because I respected them so much. But as general manager of Peel Living, I reached out to SHIP because they didn't just help me solve problems in the units where I had problems, but they solved problems throughout the building, so they established a relationship of trust and confidence amongst the broader tenant population. And I think that's what Orangeville will see with a SHIP. This will help solidify SHIP's presence within Orangeville, and you're going to see stronger supports within the community at large, not just on this one site.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Is there anyone else from the public have any questions? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on to our final official plan statutory meeting tonight. It's the official plan review for phase 1. Anybody who wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic to submit their name, phone number, mailing address, and email address to planning@orangeville.ca or call 519-941-0440, extension 2254, and reference the file number OPZ 2021-01. And note that any information collected will be a matter of public record. So we have a presentation by the town planning staff. Mr. Ward, Brandon Ward, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's statutory public meeting for what is the town's official plan review exercise, specifically for what is phase 1 of a 2-part segment for this exercise. And I'm trusting that my screen is visible to everyone viewing this evening.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So in terms of an outline for this evening's meeting, I'll touch on what is our official plan first and foremost, what's its function, what's its format, etc. I'll speak to the scoping of our review phases. I mentioned that this is phase one of a two-part exercise. I'll talk about the process that's occurred to date, as well as next steps in terms of key milestones, particularly as it relates to consultation and circulation and decision making. Then, of course, we'll talk about the purpose of tonight's meeting, and from there, I'll summarize some of the changes we're contemplating in the plan in terms of this phased review.
Hello.
With that said, I recognize it's getting rather late into the evening, so I will try to be very brief on the policy updates we're making. This will be largely consistent with what was discussed at our statutory open house held April 19th earlier this year. And then finally, I'll talk about some of the consultation that we've engaged in thus far and next steps in this exercise. So the official plan, it's a statutory planning document. Not only does it guide future development and planning activity in the town for a planning horizon, which is typically a 20-year planning horizon, it's also the blueprint for planning decision-making for the town. It has legal authority, and that decision-making by council must align with the policies of its official plan, and also any public works being undertaken by the town must align with the policies stipulated in the official plan. Now, having said that, it's a living document essentially, in that it's to be reviewed periodically in accordance with the Planning Act, and that's generally to make sure it maintains relevancy with the town's own planning values, but also maintains its alignment with prevailing broader provincial and county level policy. It's important to note that this plan, our official plan, as with any municipal official plan, must be consistent with upper level policies of both the province and the upper tier municipality, whether it be a county or a region, depending on the circumstances. So again, it's the official plan review has been phased into two segments. The reasons for that is this exercise was initiated some time ago, and following its inception in 2015, 2016, there were of course some pretty substantive policy changes made to the provincial plans, and as well the County of Dufferin enshrined their new official plan in 2015, which then necessitated the need to sort of retool this exercise. The process was halted while we assessed those changes, which were pretty significant. And with the county now moving forward with their own municipal comprehensive review, or MCR as is often referred to bring their plan into alignment with the changes made to provincial policy, we had a decision to make as to whether to continue to pause our review in abeyance until the county work is done, or move forward with some perhaps some non-growth management or county MCR related aspects of the plan, make those updates where we can, and save the balance of the plan, sort of the growth management and land use matters, into a second phase of this exercise until the county work is done, and then therefore informs some further changes in those areas that are needed to be made to the official plan. So here's a snapshot of really the process that's occurred to date. As I mentioned, sort of beginning late 2019 and into early 2020, we started with some background review work. There's basically been three statutory consultation milestones. The first being a special introductory meeting that was held June of 2020. To sort of introduce the exercise and discuss general areas being contemplated for review as part of the exercise. That brought us to, of course, the statutory open house held earlier this year, which went through a lot of the proposed policy changes we're contemplating in considerable detail. Following that, we've engaged with agencies and town departments in terms of getting review input from them, and I'll touch on that a little later in the presentation. And that brings us forward to tonight's statutory public meeting. From there going forward, we'll continue our engagement with the agencies and key divisions going forward, and take, of course, any input received from the public thus far into consideration and incorporation into any policy amendments where appropriate. and that will ultimately take us to council adoption. Now, given that this is an official plan review conducted under the Planning Act requirements, it is among those items that does defer to the County of Dufferin, who retains its approval authority for amendments of this nature. So following council's adoption of this type of amendment, it would then go to the County of Dufferin for their review and approval. And as we're sort of concluding or winding down the phase one, we'll be initiating the second part of this exercise, which again is really going to focus on more of the growth management and land use permissions and designations and things of that nature as part of this review. So here again is sort of the process outlined thus far. And ultimately, the purpose of this meeting, which of course is to really sort of check in or review the changes we're proposing to make to the official plan, and continue this engagement with the public and the community about the amendments we're pursuing, and to continue to take any comments received into consideration before we move forward into sort of the recommendation and decision-making realm for this phase one segment. So again, here are just some policy highlights or highlights of some of the key changes we're making. I'll try to go through these as briefly as I can, recognizing the timing we're in this evening. In terms of some of the housing policies we're looking at, we're looking to beef up the terminology around affordable housing, as has been a key topic for tonight's council meeting. There's been a lot of matters up for discussion with respect to affordable housing. So we're looking to enhance the terminology around that to give us better clarity and also bolster our policies to better facilitate that. And there's some enabling tools referenced here that we're not looking to finalize all the details around those implementing tools, but just introduce simply enabling policies so that if this is the direction to be pursued going forward, we'll have that solid policy footing to sort of take a leap forward and pursue if that's the direction to be taken. Second dwelling units is another key area of consideration that we thought is appropriate to review through this. So similarly with a lot of the policy themes we're looking at here, we're looking to sort of elaborate on the policy, give clear direction for ourselves and the community in terms of where these sort of second units are permitted, some criteria around how they may be facilitated, and some other enabling policies to look at possibly developing a program for awareness and documenting second units. As may have been heard in past meetings and planning decision-making, second dwelling units are broadly encouraged by provincial policy framework. That has been enhanced over time, and we just want to make sure our planning policies at our level and our official plan are aligning with those directives. Some of other policies we're looking at in terms of aging population, this has been a key theme raised earlier on in our review exercise, so we just want to simply add some more modern terminology to recognize more innovative housing formats that allows for aging in place and more age-friendly design, improving accessibility, things of that nature. Moving on to heritage, again, a lot of enabling policy direction to enhance some of the criteria for identifying heritage matters, more direction for assessing heritage properties, particularly with respect to reviewing new development or redevelopments in proximity or within heritage properties or heritage areas, and also adding other features, recognizing trees and vegetation or landscapes for that matter contribute to heritage as well. In terms of the downtown, this is a policy area we looked at also. We wanted to sort of enhance those policies as well. Recognizing a lot of the language speaks to basically maintaining the existing character. We recognize that intensification is a prominent theme likely to occur in the downtown and periphery in the coming horizon. So we wanted to make sure that as that happens, we have policies here that not only respect and preserve the character, but also enhance the downtown. Another policy directive we wanted to look at implementing is prioritizing pedestrian activity, the pedestrian experience within the downtown, recognizing that parking is an issue and needs to be accommodated, but also ensuring we have policy framework that prioritizes the pedestrian experience, if you will. Now, having said that, we are looking at some policy tools to implement to facilitate some alternative arrangements for parking provision in the downtown area. Urban design policies, that's another theme we looked at very broadly. We wanted to, again, enhance some of the criteria for specific design attributes that we felt were lacking in the current policy environment. There are certain elements here that I've listed that we want to hone in on, particularly drive-through facilities, safe environment. You see the term CPTED, that's crime prevention through environment and design. And that's basically a concept where you can use design principles of the built environment to, improve visibility and activity and really create a more comfortable and safe environment. Moving on to some of the other more technical aspects of the plan, we're looking at some of the transportation policies we're going to sort of tweak a bit to adjust to modern terminology, active transportation being one of them, just promoting the awareness and benefits of encouraging active transportation, so more pedestrian mobility and other alternative modes of moving about the town. We want to make sure we have policies to facilitate that. These two areas, servicing capacity and stormwater management, again, more technical amendments just to make sure to reflect modern or current times and conditions with respect to our servicing infrastructure and some of the capacity work that's been done since the current policies were last updated, which was 2010. Stormwater management policies, we're also looking at enhancing them to really be consistent with CVC guidelines and some of the more modern day best practices being applied for stormwater management facilities and their design. Healthy development is another concept where it really recognizes how the built environment can influence healthy behaviors and lifestyles. So here, a lot of these elements are really incorporated in some of those design policy parts of the plan, as well as the accessibility section that deals with some enhancing design elements relative to accessibility requirements, some of those age-friendly housing concepts, as well as some design guidelines policy with respect to the built form or how neighborhoods are to be designed and developed in terms of the street pattern, rear laneway housing, and so forth. Source water protection policies, that's been a very obvious area to review the plan to make sure our policies are aligning with the current source water protection plan, making sure that we're in harmony with that. Our parks and recreation policies, this has really been just a consolidation exercise. The policies as they stand are sort of in different parts of the plan. We wanted to consolidate them and give a little more direction to the town's sort of parks and recreation documents, being the Parks Master Plan and the Cycling and Trails Master Plan being really the chief documents to inform any decision-making with respect to the provision of parkland and facilities mainly through review and processing of planning applications. Sustainability is another key policy theme area we've looked at in this review. There's been a lot of attention given more recently with respect to climate change. So we want to make sure our policies are cognizant of that. We want to make sure that sustainable development criteria are addressed in the official plan, again, giving us more solid footing in terms of reviewing new developments coming forward and making sure they're going to be reflecting some of these more modern trends and approaches. We also have some policies giving us more direction for water conservation, energy efficiency, and of course, waste reduction, all of which have been pretty important topics raised by council through our review of development applications. Natural heritage, this is a policy or area that we're looking at basically retooling and updating. This, albeit maybe an area that will have some further dialogue with our agency partners, particularly Credit Valley Conservation. They've been quite instrumental in their review and comment to us on this area. So we'll be working with them very closely on this segment of review. Basically, it's sort of revamping the natural heritage system designation, which is currently the open space conservation policy framework, looking to make sure that's updated in accordance with current prevailing policy of the province and the county, as well as CVC's any CVC approaches and guidelines. So the implementation tools, really, this is our toolkit. It's sort of in the later part of the plan that really enables all of the planning tools we utilize on a more regular basis to really implement the plan policies and you know help us carry out our planning processes. I won't get into these in a great level of detail, but you know, it really is just enabling them to, or giving us a little more guidance to enable the use of these tools. In terms of consultation received thus far, we haven't admittedly gotten a lot of feedback from the community, likely because of the more housekeeping nature that these policy areas of review are sort of taking at this time. We have got some very recent submissions from some landowner interests in the town that have taken a review of this, and most of which have provided either very specific comments or just requests to be further apprised of any decision making going forward. As might be expected, comments received thus far from key town divisions and as well as our agency partners have been specific to the, I guess, the scope of review or the mandate of that particular division or agency, and have been very focused on certain aspects of the plan accordingly. So in terms of next steps, today's meeting really, again, to review the amendments we're considering, again, on the context of this first phase of the exercise, and take any questions or feedback received back into consideration and make adjustments to the policies as needed or give responses accordingly. Which takes us to the second part, is really continuing that dialogue and addressing those comments as appropriate. And ultimately, this will conclude with a recommendation for adoption for an amendment to conclude this first phase of the exercise, which we are striving to have completed either by the end of this year or very early 2022. And from there, it would be onward to Dufferin County for their approval of any amendment adopted by council. And as I stated at the outset, we're anticipating to initiate the second phase imminently, perhaps later this fall, to really dive into the more growth management and land use aspects related to the plan. Just one final note on consultation. We certainly are working on the inception of the official plan review steering committee. We know that council has recently appointed the membership to that committee, and we're going to be moving forward with an initial meeting for that committee, likely perhaps later October or early November, to sort of acquaint the committee with the exercise and specifically phase one. And we'll of course be scheduling meetings as necessary for the conclusion of not only phase one, but obviously the inception and advancement of phase two. So with that said, we have a web page. It's on the slide before you that contains all of the background information and any public information materials related to this exercise. That includes, of course, the background review document that's sort of in draft form and will be updated and finalized as we conclude this phase one segment, as well as draft policy changes. Just in conclusion, the planning at orangeville.ca is the email. We're sort of advising anyone who has an interest in this to make their comments too. With that said, that concludes my presentation, and be happy to receive any questions or input. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. We have some questions from council. Go ahead, Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. I'm always thankful when Mr. Ward provides a very thorough presentation, a lot of detail and a lot of learning, and really a lot of information for us to digest. Looking at page 100 of the report, and this is focusing on a couple of areas, and I know thematically we were talking about affordable housing throughout this evening. What mechanisms are potentially going to be put into place for developers to consider building affordable housing? I know that this was referenced in some previous meetings throughout this calendar year, And I'm just wondering if that would be embedded into that particular part of affordable housing. And then I also have a second question. So I'll listen for your response, Mr. Ward.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Andrews. I'll perhaps try to start, and Ms. Russell, if she has anything to add, I know this is an area she looked at very carefully. She may wish to jump in as well. But I think at this time, the areas we're looking at is first and foremost to formally define what constitutes affordable housing. We want to make sure we're consistent with provincial policy and county policy in that respect, but also, again, enable some potential tools we may wish to pursue, namely a municipal housing facilities bylaw. The policy would enable the potential pursuit and adoption of a bylaw to that effect. That's consistent with county policy direction that encourages municipalities to pursue that. And what that housing facilities bylaw does, in essence, is enables the town to pursue agreements with not-for-profit entities that provide affordable housing services, and it allows the town to potentially pursue incentives or support or relief to those parties through an agreement with those entities for their provision of affordable housing in the town. The other piece is it's a little more nebulous in that it's referred to as inclusionary zoning or inclusionary housing. It's a concept spoken to in the Planning Act. It is largely focused around specific areas, major transit station areas. That does not apply to Orangeville, admittedly. That really is what holds the teeth in terms of the implementation of this tool. So having said that, given that Orangeville doesn't have a major transit station area, the policies are a little more encouraging basis in terms of it allows us or enables us to pursue some sort of bylaw to require what, I guess, first and foremost, I should state that inclusionary zoning really is mandating an obligation for a certain composition of a development to comprise of affordable housing. So that's the reason why it really is more targeted to those key transit station areas. Given that we don't have that, the policy is more encouraging, something that we may be able to pursue in the future if circumstances are appropriate for such.
Okay. Ms. Russell, I guess you were going to provide a comment?
No, Mr. Ward covered it with the inclusionary zoning is all I was going to add.
Okay, great. And Deputy Mayor McIntosh, I just have one follow-up very quickly. And this was also in the same section, Mr. Ward. This is regarding the limiting of a second dwelling unit to each lot. Would that include, and this has been discussed, tiny homes or an exterior in-law suite?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I don't know if a second dwelling unit, it would really depend on the composition. I think the tiny home concept is really sort of an innovative approach to the main dwelling unit itself. I think second dwelling units, if it was to be the policies we're looking at introducing would better facilitate them in a detached structure. And again, a lot of it is more enabling, speaking to criteria to more be refined in the zoning bylaw to give more specificity as to where and how and what types, et cetera, second dwelling units may be permissible.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Ward.
Mayor Brown, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Ward, a couple of questions. Secondary units in townhouses. I, as a realtor, I've been in a lot of townhouses in Orangeville, and the basements typically are quite small. If we want to talk about 61st Street, for instance, new townhouse, relatively new townhouse complex there. The basements are pretty small. Is there, I guess, to have a suite, you have to have a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom and living quarters. Is that like a living room? Is that, how do you characterize a unit? And is there a minimum square footage requirement for a unit?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Mayor Brown, those are certainly important considerations we are looking at through these policies, albeit the policies themselves won't get into perhaps that level of sophisticated detail. It really does itemize, these are the areas that need to be refined more specifically in the implementing zoning bylaw. So that's where you might get into some more specific provisions with respect to, say, minimum floor area, sufficient means of access, parking that currently exists in the bylaw, but it might be something we would refine in terms of implementing those policies. What this policy review does at this time is better enable second dwelling units in the town. As I mentioned, this is a broader, more strongly encouraged entity in the Planning Act and provincial policy that really does mandate municipalities more broadly be permissive of second units. So that doesn't say we have to permit them everywhere, but it does say we need to be permissive of them, and that doesn't preclude us from creating more specific provisions to address some of the apparent challenges with accommodating second units.
Right, and of course, we have a parking problem. It's heading towards a crisis in this town, and I think we've got to be cognizant of that issue when we talk about putting units in townhouses. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was servicing capacity that the town has, both water and sewer. Under what policies was the current capacity calculated? And we've had some conservation measures put in place. For instance, water meters. Some of the fixtures are not as high volume. Is that being taken into consideration? And is there a reset for that number with using conservation policies?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Mayor Brown, I perhaps will respond to that and may defer to Mr. Jones. He may have a little more insight into this, but the policy amendment really does just take the current numbers and update them according to our latest and greatest numbers we have based on some of the work that's been done since the official plan policies were last reviewed and updated in 2010.
Maybe if we could ask Mr. Jones to weigh in there as my last question.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to Mayor Brown. The Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks has Procedure D5, which dictates how municipalities are to calculate their uncommitted reserve capacity for water supply servicing as well as wastewater treatment servicing. Those calculations are done on an annual basis, and they are based on our actual usage. So at our water pollution control plant, we meter how much flow reaches the plant, and we look at those numbers as well as numbers from previous years to determine how much capacity remains at the plant that can be allocated to future development. Similarly with water, we look at our maximum day usage, which is what we must supply, and we evaluate it on an annual basis. So any conservation efforts that we are making, if they are indeed bearing fruit, they will be revealed through the actual metered usage of water and sewage generation, and we'll be able to see that benefit, and that will be worked into our calculations of how much capacity is available to allocate.
Right. So basically, we're in real time from year to year on that calculation.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor, to Mr. Ward. I've got a couple of questions or comments, and excuse my ignorance if they don't fall under the official plan and go under the zoning bylaw. I still try and learn every day what the difference is between those two. So my first comment is, and maybe it's not in this phase or a different phase, but I was wondering if there's any address to private daycares being permitted in townhouses. Is that something that falls under the official plan?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Sherwood, that's something that would be more carefully looked at through the zoning bylaw. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that clarification. And one more, Deputy Mayor.
Go ahead.
You're mentioning about basement apartments, and I always hear this terminology, whether it's be through real estate or whatever, that there's legal and illegal basement apartments, and obviously our town has an influx of both. So If this policy, this official plan is approved, will the illegal basement apartments be grandfathered in, or will they still be illegal?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Sherwood, I would suggest that that's more of a specific issue for the zoning bylaw. The policies right now are more enabling in nature. With that said, basement or second dwelling units are still obligated to go through the building permit approval route. So if there's one that exists out there and hasn't gone through that process, despite changes made to the bylaw or even to the official plan for that matter, that wouldn't change that obligation to obtain the proper building permit approvals. I just want to reiterate that to sort of acknowledge that and better proactively address that issue, we have introduced a policy to speak to the encouragement of developing some sort of awareness program or even tracking and documenting program to better account for existing second units on the landscape and promote more awareness of, you know, the legalities and prerequisites to their legal function.
So is there something right now for someone that, say, buys a property that already has a basement apartment in it, they don't know if it's legal or not, or illegal? Is there a communication through the town that people could, you know, reveal that they have this basement apartment and make sure that it's complying?
Through you again, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Sherwood, there is a process we do offer where interested parties are able to request a compliance request from us that does look at, you know, compliance with the zoning bylaw, building permit approvals and history and things of that nature. That is offered on our website and would perhaps encourage anybody looking to, you know, purchase a property and may have questions about any second unit in there that may perhaps be answered through that process.
Thank you. Even those, both of those seem to be dealt with under the zoning bylaw, so I apologize for taking away from the official plan conversation. Thank you.
Mayor Brown, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Councillor Sherwood, and to Mr. Ward. The idea of a compliance audit on a basement apartment, I think, is a very good idea. And, you know, as a realtor that's represented both sellers who have got a licensed or a legal apartment and those who haven't, I can tell you, not only does it add value to your home to have it audited properly and to be approved properly, but obviously the safety of your tenants is paramount as well. So I think the town should be encouraging compliance audits. I know Deputy Mayor McIntosh has been involved in, I'm sure, hundreds of them in his career as a fire chief and fireman. And you know, if people that do the do-it-yourself basement fix-up really aren't doing themselves any favors when it comes to the value that they're adding to their basement. In some cases, they're actually subtracting from the value when they don't follow the correct protocols, and again, potentially endangering their tenants. So I don't know if it's a third party or whether the town could start doing those kind of compliance audits, but be a great thing. And I think the realty community would certainly appreciate people getting on board with making apartments legal. So creating some sort of a list of addresses that are compliant would be a good idea, in my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we tried to get a registry going for basement apartments, and I don't know if that continued after I left, but we were trying. I would estimate 90% of the basement apartments in town are illegal, just from what I was seeing when I was doing my job. So anyway, any other questions from council? Seeing none, are there any questions from the public? Hearing none. Mr. Ward, the council motion, what would you like it to be? Just to accept it, or is that all you're looking for?
To you, Deputy Mayor, there is a staff report included in the agenda that contains a little more detail to the presentation. I believe it has a recommendation stating that council receive this as information at tonight's public meeting.
Thank you. Mayor Brown and Councillor Andrews, all in favor? Passed. I now turn the meeting back over to Mayor Brown.
All right, we just have one more item, and that is the passing of a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville at its council public meeting held on October the 4th. May I have a motion to approve this bylaw, please? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? And a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much. All the best.
Night, folks.
Good night. Next week.
Yep. Thank you.